Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome your host, award-winning broadcaster and author, Iman Rapeti.
She's amazing. She's a French hip-hop star, and some of my best memories are with me and my kids in the car listening to Aya, you know, beautiful. And I hope that that, in a sense, can infuse our energy today. Is everyone excited? I know business people are very serious people. Pens in hand, well, not pens anymore, whatever technology you're using to sign deals and to leave with bags of cash. I know that's very serious business. But you know, we all come into this place in different ways. We might have had a really terrible start to the morning. Joburg traffic can be really horrendous and awful. So I just want to create a mood for you to be present, to be calm, to have some joy in your day, to enjoy the panels, to make new associations, to create some new networks, and to leave here, hopefully, with a more integrated understanding of how we make the Southern African region work optimally for mutual benefit. And that's always the key, is that we all benefit mutually from our engagements. So bonjour et bienvenue. My French is horrible, but I'm trying my best. Good morning, sawubona, ekseni wamukelekile. It is a pleasure and a privilege for me to be able to join you this morning and to welcome you to the Southern Africa France Business Forum. It is hosted by Business France, the French South Africa Chamber of Commerce, and the commerce industry and the foreign trade advisors of France. So we've got a lot of amazing people in the room. I also want to acknowledge the presence this morning of the following honored individuals. The French ambassador to South Africa, His Excellency Aurélien LECHEVALLIER. I just love saying French words and names. The Minister for Agriculture, Water and Land Reform from the Republic of Namibia, Calle Schlettwein. The Deputy Minister for Higher Education, Science, Innovation in South Africa, the Honorable Buti MANAMELA, the Mayor of the City of Johannesburg, Mpho Phalatse, the French ambassadors from the SADC region, the visiting delegation of business leaders from France, the Chairman of the French South Africa Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Yves Guénon, the General Manager for Business France, Mr. Axel Barrault, the President of the French Trade Advisors, Mr. Jean-Claude Lasserre, the Commissioner for the Competition Commission in South Africa, Mr. Tembinkosi BONAKELE. All protocol is observed. I hope that I've included everyone. As we go along, I will be introducing some more of our honored guests. So this event would also not be possible, ladies and gentlemen, without sponsors. So we would like to say thank you very much to our sponsors. We bring together 100 top business leaders from France and 200 business leaders and decision makers from the Southern Africa region. So that is kind of a big deal. Would you agree? Yes. It's kind of a big deal. Yeah. So please feel very, very welcome today. It's really lovely to have you with us. So I'm a huge Francophile. I criticize France too, as we all, you know, as I'm entitled to, but I'm a huge Francophile. I love, and when I was in France not so long ago, I see you have the Simone de Beauvoir, a whole institute dedicated to her, one of my favorite philosophers. I had coffee at Le Magot. It's homage really to a lot of the French philosophers and painters and so on. So Simone is one of my best. And she wrote once in The Ethics of Ambiguity, the present is not a potential past. It is the moment of choice and action. So today we are going to be measured by what we do and whether our actions eloquently and effectively serve our intentions. So the reason we're here is to build inclusively, to strengthen the ties between France and countries in the Southern African region that have been years in the making. As you may know, France is a strategic partner to South Africa and its economic and social development. We have nearly 400 French companies in South Africa, and they employ 65,000 South Africans. This was so interesting to me. Between 2019 and now, France invested over 70 billion rand in the economy, and you have a key presence in sectors like energy, financial services, healthcare, manufactured goods, transport. I mean, the list is absolutely endless. And if we look back, French investment in South Africa has multiplied 20-fold in the last 10 years. And that's pretty remarkable too. Imagine what we could do in the next 10 years. So for my part this morning, I'm looking forward to great ideas, concrete possibilities for collaboration, and most importantly, a heart that cares for doing business ethically. So on that note, I would like to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Aurélien LECHEVALLIER to officially welcome you.
Thank you very much, Iman, dear Program Director. Sani Bonani, bonjour. Good morning. Welcome to our business forum. Welcome to the Southern Africa France Business Forum, organized by the team France Export in South Africa, comprising of foreign trade advisors of France in Southern Africa, the French South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Business France, of course, and the Embassy, and all our Southern African partners. I would like to acknowledge also all of you for coming today. Thank you very much for your presence, your leadership, and for being available. And of course, I would like to acknowledge a few VIPs with special greetings. Honorable Minister for Agriculture, Water and Land Reform from the Republic of Namibia, Minister Calle Schlettwein. Thank you very much for being here. Mr. Jacko MAREE, President Ramaphosa's Special Envoy for Investment. Thank you very much, Jacko, for your presence. And we know you work hard for make the business run smoother between France and Southern Africa. Honorable Mpo Palatse, Mayor of the City of Johannesburg. I think the Mayor has not arrived yet, but she will be with us later today. Deputy Minister for Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Honorable Buti MANAMELA. Dear Anthony COSTA, Advisor of the President. Thank you, Anthony, for being here. The French ambassadors and consuls from the SADC region, Southern Africa business representatives, of course, visiting delegation of business leaders from France, the Commissioner for the Competition Commission in South Africa, Mr. Tembinkosi BONAKELE, the Chairman of the French South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Yves Guénon, President of the French Trade Advisors, Mr. Jean-Claude Lasserre. And I think that's it, all protocols observed. Thank you very much. It's very exciting to be here. I must say we have been waiting for this moment for a long time. I would like to especially thank also all our sponsors because we are here thanks to their support. So I will list them. You can also see them on the screen. The companies Pernod Ricard, Total Energy, Bureau Veritas, Air Liquide, Bolloré Logistics, Dassault Systems, Mazars, Proparco, Trace Academia, Alstom, BNP Paribas, Codra, Veolia, Schneider Electric, Air France, if you want to fly to France, Alliance Française, if you want to take French lessons, Amen. They are here, the director of the French Alliance in Johannesburg. You can please rise, Lionel, and Sébastien from Pretoria. So please sign in and register. They have also a meeting room over there to start your French lessons today. It's very interactive. That was not in the speech, but I thought that I would take advantage of that opportunity. Polyglot and Sanofi. So many sponsors, many companies involved in the preparation of this forum. And we all thought it would be very timely to meet today, to take stock, to assess the situation together. I see James is here. Thank you, James Voss from Cape Town. We have many politicians also and business representatives from the Western Cape here. It's really all South Africa and the Southern Africa region that is represented, and it's very, I think, important to acknowledge everyone. We have, as you know, already a very strong business platform between Southern Africa and France and the EU. The EU is the first trade partner of Southern Africa, and South Africa is the first trade partner for France. So the existing business links are already very, very strong. The SADC market, as you know, is more than 350 million people. So it's also a very significant market. And in the region, we count more than 400 French companies already here, and they represent more than 100,000 employees. So very significant numbers already in all sectors. That's also, as you may know, something specific with French investments in the region. We are not focused on one or two sectors, but we are really present across the board, all the sectors that are represented here today, and we will go through them during the business forum. We have already significant footprint in all the economic sectors in the region. And including during this very difficult COVID period, we know that the French companies have kept investing and looking at Southern Africa as a major opportunity for business. You may remember that during the different South African investment conferences led and chaired by President Cyril Ramaphosa, the French companies teamed up and pledged significant amounts of tangible investments, 20 billion rands of investment 2 years ago, already delivered. And it was February, right, Anthony? It was an even bigger number with 50 billion rands of new investments, tangible investments for the country, representing more than 10 French companies. So we are talking again about an already very significant and strong business platform. But today we are looking for more. We are looking for exploring more opportunities. And I think these opportunities are there in spite of all the challenges. And my wish for us today is really to have a very frank conversation, to make sure that we put all our ideas, all our questions on the stage, on the tables, and in the different meeting rooms. Let us be very straightforward when we talk about new opportunities. Let us talk about skills. We know that we have wonderful skills in the region, but we also know that sometimes for the companies it's not easy to find specific skills. So we need also vocational training. We need to develop these programs. Let's talk about BEE in South Africa. I mean, this is something very concrete for the foreign companies and our South African French companies in the region. Let's talk about visa issues, for example. We know also that's an important point. The needs of consumers. Let's talk about energy, of course, and infrastructures in general, including digital infrastructure, digital services. Let us talk about service providers, subcontractors. That's also very concretely our questions from our companies, our investors. Financing systems. We know the banking systems, insurance companies are also very sophisticated, developed in the region. Let's engage on this conversation as well. Let's talk about maybe tax incentives or special economic zones. They are part of our important talks today. Let's talk about the COVID situation. Is it over? Do we still have constraints, COVID regulations at stake? Let's talk, of course, about the concerns we all have regarding the rising of the prices, commodity prices, due also to the war in Ukraine. This is what is at stake today, and this is why I think we are such a large number of people attending this business forum at a very timely moment. So let's really look for tangible results today to increase trade, to increase investments, to increase jobs creation, especially for the youth in the region, but also on the other way around. We are looking for more Southern Africa investments and trade towards France and towards Europe. And you know that France is a very welcoming country when it comes to trade and investment, and it's more and more a getaway to the European Union, to Europe, and to develop also with you projects on the African continent. So we are very excited to be here. We really look forward to it. As you know, there are very important challenges that we really want to raise today, and we are at your disposal, the French team, the French people, to accompany all your projects in the months and years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I must just share with you a dream I had a few weeks ago, flying first class in Air France, speaking French. So it's so prophetic that you've mentioned Alliance Française and Air France. I'm just saying, I mean, I'm not saying anything specific. I'm just telling you about this dream I had. Anyway, so next up, and you know, spot on for expressing those sentiments, Ambassador, around the opportunities for where we can work together. And I want to say to everyone, when we're having the discussions, let's keep it as practical as possible. We don't want to have another talk shop about a talk shop. And I know that in platforms like this, and I've been in them before, it is always very outcomes driven. We walk away with real arrangements, agreements, collaboration that really make an impact in our economic space, and we do not have the time to waste. So I really encourage you to pick up on that message of how we can work and collaborate together. So the support for this region is shared by all in France, and I want to share with you a video now that relays a message of support by the Honorable Frank RIESTER, who is the Minister Delegate of Foreign Trade for the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am very happy to say a few words at the onset of this promising business forum, even though I could not attend in person. Let me start by congratulating all members and partners of our very own team France Export, Business France, French Foreign Trade Advisor, the French South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, with, of course, the full support of the French Embassy and all our South African and Southern African counterparts. Thank you all for successfully organizing such an ambitious event. I am convinced this will help strengthen the relationship between French and Southern African companies, as well as foster new projects and partnerships. The ambition underpinning this business forum is crystal clear. Let me state it plainly. Now that the post-COVID world is finally within reach, France is keen to continue developing the strategic interest that it shares with Southern African countries. As a regional powerhouse, South Africa, of course, holds a special place on the subcontinent and in our strategy. We share a set of common values. We share a common sense of urgency on global challenges, such as climate action, global health and sustainable development, and we share a common commitment to the multilateral world order. On the economic side, we have much to build together. I witnessed firsthand during my official visit in 2020 how modern, dynamic, and diversified the South African economy has already become. Our bilateral alliance is taking shape and rapidly expanding, and as you know, France is ready and willing to help South Africa rise even higher and grow even faster. Nearly 400 French companies trust South Africa, where they employ more than 65,000 people. That is not all. At the 2022 South African Investment Conference, French companies pledged a further 50 billion rand in investments in South Africa in key sectors such as tourism, agriculture, energy, retail, and health. At the same time, more and more Southern African companies are taking an interest in the French market, as shown by the large delegation that visited Vivatech last week. Several iconic French Southern African projects have already seen daylight, and we want to keep bringing even more forward. Building upon our long-standing ties, the delegation of French business leaders who are participating in the forum is keen on exploring investment opportunities and will discuss, among other topics, how to rebuild our economies in a post-pandemic world, intra-Africa trade and regional integration, skills development, diversity and inclusion, finance and bankability of SADC projects, food security and diversification of the energy sector. Dear friends, I hope that this forum will pave the way for new, mutually beneficial, long-term business partnerships between companies of both our countries. I wish you all an excellent and very productive business forum, and I hope to see you soon in Paris or in Joburg.
That was His Excellency, Mr. Frank RIESTER, who is the Minister for Foreign Trade for the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs. Now, up next, I would love to introduce you to Mr. Jacko MAREE, who is a special presidential envoy for South Africa and also the non-executive deputy chairman of Standard Bank. I remember reading something that Jacko wrote last year about hope not being a strategy when it comes to the reality of the setbacks that we have experienced in the South African economy. And of particular concern to Jacko is the high level of borrowing by our government. He adds that the only way for us to change our growth trajectory is to invest up to 35% of our GDP in growth and growth-generating initiatives. And it is on this note that I want to hand over to him, because that in part is what is driving our gathering today. How best to lean into opportunities that can unlock growth for all of us. Jacko, welcome.
Thank you, Iman. It's great to be here today. Ambassador, thank you for hosting us and for all the organization that's gone in from the different French business organizations. It's really wonderful and gratifying to be back in person meetings rather than sitting on Zoom calls. And thank you for taking the lead in that regard. And I'm not going to mention all of the dignitaries and the important people that have been mentioned already. You're all welcome. Those of you who are not from South Africa, you're all welcome here. The French business delegation in particular, welcome. You may well ask, what is a special presidential investment envoy? Yeah, I'm not a government employee. I'm a volunteer, and I used to run Standard Bank for many years with lots of representation around the African continent. So I have a good feel for many of the other countries that form part of this discussion today, the Southern African countries, and they're dear to my heart. But I'm here representing South Africa today. When President Ramaphosa was appointed leader of the ANC, he approached four of us to help promote and facilitate investment in the country, both domestic and foreign investment. And subsequently, two further members of our team have been added, so there's 6 of us. We were tasked at that time, which is now 4 years ago, to raise $100 billion in investment over 5 years. And at the last conference, which has been referred to today, which was in March, we'd got to sort of 95% of that target with 4 conferences and pledges. This year, there was, despite all the troubles and travails of COVID and so forth, there were 80 pledges made, amounting to about $22 billion or 330 billion rand, and it was across many sectors: energy, automotive, mineral beneficiation, mining, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, the creative industries, fashion, infrastructure, property and logistics, food and beverages, business process outsourcing, and digital services. So across many sectors, and I know a lot of those are represented here today. And we've heard already about the commitment made by French business, the French Chamber, both in 2019 and again this year, and that's deeply appreciated, and it was very visible that France kind of came together and made a commitment as a group of major companies, and it was deeply appreciated. South Africa has many problems, but one of the great blessings we have from our past is that we have so many international companies that are represented here. We've heard the number of French companies in the region, but the same applies to so many other European companies. And so it's fertile ground to talk to people about expanding their operations, because a lot of this is not about new investment, it's about modernizing, it's about increasing. And it is worth remembering and I keep reminding people in South Africa about it, that if you look at the total amount of foreign direct investment in the ground here in South Africa, 3/4 of everything that is in this country emanates, or foreign direct investment emanates from Europe and the UK. So it's hugely important, and yes, Asia and China and these countries are also becoming more important, but if you look at what is here historically, so much of it comes from Europe and the UK, and of course France is a critical component of that, as we've heard from some of the figures. Today is a business forum, and so it's not just about investment, it's also about trade, and South Africa is one of the most open economies in the world when you look at the total amount of imports and exports as a percentage of GDP. So there are lots of opportunities both ways. But and it's not just about South Africa today. It's of course it's about the region. But my focus is clearly on South Africa. Why is investment such a focus for the government? We all know about the high unemployment, the poverty, inequality, and therefore the only solution to that is to grow. But the question is, how do you grow an economy with the challenges that we have? There's limited space fiscally for the government to stimulate and spend money. There's so many other competing demands on the fiscus. So the government is constrained. High borrowings, which Iman referred to. High interest rates now, interest rates going up around the world, and we are following suit. And we've had the benefit in recent years of booming commodity prices, but that clearly is not something that is sustainable. So it really leaves you with only one option as the government, which is to promote investment if you want the economy to grow. And that includes foreign direct investment and domestic direct investments. This is aside from sort of financial investment in bonds and stocks and so on. And we all have read and know that to really get any economy growing quickly through that means you need to get the investment to GDP ratio up to the 25 to 30% of GDP level. And South Africa right now is tracking much closer to around about 15%. So there has to be a step change there. And if we want to, add 10% onto that, so from 15 to 25, and hopefully get the economy moving, that requires investment of something like 600 billion rand or $40 billion per annum, over and above what's already happening. So this is a huge number that we're looking for, and there's only one place that it can come from, and that is the private sector. It can't really come from state-owned enterprises and government for all the reasons that we well know. We have had lots of ideological debates in this country. Within the ANC, there are obviously very big differences of opinion, but the reality is, given the pressures that we face, there is no option but to embrace the private sector and encourage it to invest and to grow. And how do you do that? Well, we all know that you need the necessary structural reforms to make it easier for business to operate and encourage business to invest, because businesses only invest if they have confidence and if they believe in the long-term future of the country and, of course, the industry in which they operate. There's been lots of criticism around our structural reforms, but one has to say that there has been also lots of progress. If you look at what has happened in recent times, the changes that have occurred in the energy arena, encouraging renewable energy projects, self-generation, embedded generation, the changes have been dramatic. We've seen an auctioning off of spectrum, which is going to unleash a lot of digital opportunities in many forms. You've seen our transport state-owned enterprise Transnet opening up to private sector involvement, and you've seen a special unit in the presidency being created to minimize or to find ways of reducing bureaucratic red tape. So a lot of good stuff is happening. We need more, but when one wants to give credit where credit is due. There's also a particular focus on infrastructure. We know that infrastructure is a huge issue in all developing economies, and clearly this is both a problem where infrastructure is not working well, but it's also a massive opportunity for companies operating in that space. Yeah, and so there are, why invest in South Africa? The reality is that we are still the gateway to Africa, and we have high quality logistics and infrastructure despite the challenges that we know about. It's the largest presence of multinationals on the continent. There's some 180 of the Fortune 500 companies have operations here, so there is a network. We have challenges in certain areas of manufacturing, but we are a hub for manufacturing in certain industries, and obviously also a hub for the rest of the continent in certain product areas. The middle class is growing, and we have the most affluent consumer base on the continent. South Africa's got a number of great free trade agreements that provide export platforms into global markets, and of course the African continental free trade agreement as well. We are a innovation and tech hub for the continent. We have good universities. The quantity of graduates being produced may not be sufficient, but we are a hub for technology, and there's a growing ecosystem here. Of course, we've got abundant natural resources and great capabilities in all aspects of mining. Our financial sector is well known for being world class, and it therefore means that South Africa presents lots of opportunities, but for you it all depends on the industry that you are interested in, because each industry has its own opportunities and challenge. We have a really good one-stop shop, Invest South Africa, which facilitates and helps companies that are trying to do business here and are struggling, and has been well resourced. And of course, we as the envoys also work closely with Invest SA, and have tried where possible to facilitate and unblock companies that are trying to invest who've run into difficulties. So with that, I'd just like to again say how delighted I am to see a room full of people talking about business between France and Southern Africa, and I look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jacko. And if the rumors are to be believed, then we won't have to wear masks anymore in public in the next couple of days. But you didn't hear it from me because I haven't authenticated the source. Just letting you know. So recently, I've been watching a number of comedy specials on Netflix. And they all invariably have the usual COVID jokes about masking and vaccines and the woes of lockdown. I mean, there are so many coronavirus jokes out there. It is a pandemic in and of itself. Okay, that was kind of lame. But I'm personally tired of everything that is COVID related. But whether we like it or not, it has had a devastating impact on our lives and on our livelihoods. COVID has increased poverty, inequality, and unemployment. and an insufficiently coherent approach to attaining and holding on to investors as a region is also working against us. But I love, that's a beauty pageant I can get behind, Jacko, when you paint that beautiful picture of the opportunity in South Africa. Every country is dealing with its difficulties. The thing that we have as an advantage is our ability to be resilient. You talked about a very sophisticated logistics network, infrastructure projects that are already on the boom, the specialized economic zones. There are so many attributes of what makes this a really amazing opportunity, even for a green shoots economy in new sectors and growth. So I encourage you to see that picture. So after 2 years of the pandemic in a slow growth environment, the African Development Bank is predicting a rebound for 2022 at a rate of 2.4%. So I really think that leads us into this question that our first panel is going to be discussing. How do we build South Africa and Southern Africa's economy post-COVID? What opportunities are in this space? I'm going to introduce the panel to you shortly. But to set the scene for us on this topic is the CEO of Business Leadership in South Africa, Ms. Busisiwe MAVUSO. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And I've been giving a long list of people that I need to acknowledge, and I think maybe in the interest of time, Iman, allow me to not do that, and maybe let me just say all protocols observed. And His Excellency Aurélien LECHEVALLIER, I'm hoping that I'm not butchering that. I think let me acknowledge you and thank you very much, for the opening remarks that you gave this morning. And it's very exciting indeed, as Jacko has said, to have a room full of people who deem it fit and who still see South Africa as an investment destination. It's very encouraging for us. Because let's agree and let's accept that without investment, then I think we are going to be seriously in trouble as a country. So the invitation for me this morning has been to share my thoughts on what rebuilding the South African economy should look like. And I think I absolutely agree with Jacko that hope is a very terrible strategy. So we had better have strict interventions in place to say, what is it that we need to be focusing on as a country? And yes, a lot is not going right in South Africa at the moment, and we cannot probably maybe focus on everything. But maybe what are the 2-3 things that we think we should be prioritizing as a country? And I think from that perspective, allow me to just share 3 of the interventions that I think are critical and are important for South Africa to focus on this morning. So if we're trying to answer the question of what rebuilding the South African economy should look like, then top of the list, and Jacko has already spoken to it, is that structural rigidities in South Africa at the moment is depressing private investment and it's hindering the inclusive growth and job creation. So the first critical area of focus is definitely the structural reforms. And yes, Jacko has already spoken to all the interventions that we have put in place and the reforms that we've already implemented as a country to try and ensure that ours is a conducive environment. But I think we also need to accept that a lot still needs to be done. And if you were to ask me in terms of what is it that we should be accelerating from a structural reform perspective, then mine would be that let's maybe accept and agree that the proper functioning of the network industries is critical. Now you see, in South Africa's case, of the 4 network industries that we have as a country, three are largely dysfunctional. And that is energy supply, it is rail and ports, and it is water. So the one network industry that is operating efficiently is telecommunications. And this is previously the 100% state-owned telecom, which was subsequently privatized. And yes, there is a lot of work that government is currently putting on, you know, in terms of the energy supply front. And we've seen the lifting of the 100 megawatts for self-generation. And I think we've seen the interventions that have actually been put in place in as far as trying to fix Transnet and making sure that the ports are functioning as they should. But I think we need to agree that on the ports front, on the rail front, on the water front, we need to implement urgent interventions. You see, this is important because Jacko spoke about the 333 billion of investment commitments that we got at the last investment conference. But let's accept that when these companies make these investments, the inherent condition precedent is that the network industries, at the very least, have to work. Now, you see, we have to be careful as a country because you can't attract investors and overly burden them at the same time. You see, capital is like water. It will always follow the path of least resistance. So the private sector is most likely to invest, and it is going to invest. But let's accept that the condition precedent and the two issues that are actually going to trigger the investment from the private sector, it's going to be a functioning state and it's going to be infrastructure that works. No country can succeed without an effective state, and no country can succeed without efficient infrastructure. So the network industries, and those are the very basics, right? Because, I mean, goods have to come in and out of the country. You know, goods have to be transported via rail. Water has to work. So if investment is our focus, and energy is not what it should be, how are we hoping to get this right as a country? So as we get on the path, and as we've started on the path of critical structural reforms, let's agree that top of the list has to be the network industries. And I think that segues me to my second issue. I've said I'm only going to touch on three issues. The second issue is the issue of state capacitation. Now, you see, if you ask me, this one trumps everything. It trumps everything because if you look at it, you will see that the genesis of our problems as a country is that we don't have a capable state. So you therefore need to look at what does leveraging the private sector look like in the environment that we find ourselves in. And I think the president has spoken at length about the interventions that we need to put in place as a country in terms of the professionalization of the public service. Now, in the last 10 to 15 years, South Africa has had a serious skills exodus within the public sector, and this has created a serious capacity gap. You see, the issue of state capacitation is important because a key determinant of any functioning state is its administration. So if you are going to fail at administration, then I think let's agree that a lot of things and the basics are actually not going to be in place. Without proper administration, you cannot have a capable state. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to answer the question of, as we try to rebuild the South African economy post-COVID, what are the issues that we're supposed to be focusing on as South Africa? And I'm saying that without a capable state, you are wasting your time. If you look at what is currently happening in Gqeberha, in the Eastern Cape, at the moment we're sitting with a water crisis and we are quickly approaching a day zero. And when you look at how did we get there, what is the genesis of those problems, you will see that municipal mismanagement is the issue. And it is estimated that the city loses about a third of its water supply to leaks in its piping and has a backlog of about 3,000 unfixed leaks. and a lot of other inefficiencies. Now, what set countries apart, or what set countries apart, is governments. It is not geography, it is not ethnicity, it is not strongman leadership, it is not natural endowments, it is governments. Governments are what separate good, prosperous states to bad, failing states. So the issue of state capacity matters because it is governments that separates good, prosperous states to bad, failing states. And the diminishing state capacity therefore weakens our business case for investment along with our position as a gateway to the African continent in the case of South Africa. And closely aligned to the issue of a capable state is the third issue that I'd like to address, which is the systemic and endemic corruption that we have to fix in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about what is it going to take for South Africa to rebuild our economy post-COVID? What are the issues that we need to be focusing on? And corruption is the cancer that we need to rid ourselves of as a country. Corruption is the greatest impediment to the country's rebuilding efforts. You see, if you're going to be sitting in an environment where elected officials steal food parcels from the hungry and PPE from the sick and dying, then you know for sure that you have lost it. It is a serious problem. And how systemic it is in our country is very worrying. This is one of the things that is actually going to make South Africa lose its position as the gateway to the African continent. Yes, we might be the most advanced economy in the continent, and yes, we might be resilient as an economy, and yes, we might have a lot going for us, but corruption is the can. You know, a lot of people have lost faith in leadership because of corruption. So it cannot be. You see, nations and countries fall apart and become failed states due to corruption. And that is how seriously the issue is. When governance fails at that level, at government level, and don't get me wrong, I'm not excusing the private sector corruption. Yes, we had the state capture project in this country, and we had the state capture project in this and the industrial scale looting that happened precisely because the private sector was complicit. But let's agree and let's accept that if governance fails at government level, then you are in serious trouble as a country. You see, I think we're going to have to realize that state capital ought to behave differently. And I'm not saying that private capital should not, but state capital has to behave differently. It has to behave differently because it has more responsibility. It has to behave differently because the capital that they are dealing with, or the monies that they are dealing with, is taxpayers' monies. It has to behave differently, especially in our case, because we're sitting with 46% unemployment in terms of the expanded definition, where you have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. State capital has to behave differently because we have just overtaken Brazil as the most unequal society in the world. State capital has to behave differently if you are sitting in a country with 65% unemployment. So state capital has a huge responsibility and it has to behave differently. So corruption is a cancer that South Africa needs to rid itself of. So colleagues, I think I've reached my allocated time limit, and thank you for the invitation. You know, I honestly believe that as business, we have an obligation to sharply raise these issues Because you see, business cannot and should not play to the populist gallery in the place of sound economic analysis. You know, countries go down when the intelligentsia and corporates abandon politics. And even if we wanted to abandon politics, we cannot. We cannot because ours is a political economy. We cannot because our economic growth as a country is constrained by its political economy. We cannot because politics equals economics. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Busi, thank you very much for a very sobering picture of what's happening in South Africa, what's happening with our political complex. I mean, it's one thing to say, you know, let's attract investment, let's paint this really glorious picture, and then you come and you see something else. So we have to show you our beauty, we have to show you our warts, we have to show you everything so that you know what you're in for, basically when you partner and you work in this region. But there is so much opportunity. I mean, I do a lot of work in the leadership sector, and the one observation we make consistently is in an environment of risk, in an environment where you know, you need to exercise a different way of strategy or a different, you know, method of strategy. Environments that are, you know, where everything might not always seem together are opportunities that you can create for yourself in how you operate and how you navigate. So whatever you're hearing, you know, that kind of puts you in the root of, oh my goodness, you know, how much of a factor is this? How much of an inhibiting factor or risky factor is this? You have to think about how brave you can be in those environments and how resilient you can be to weather those storms to arrive at a position of ultimate outcome. And really that's one of the things we're going to lean into in the theme with our next panel. And I'm going to invite everyone to come up really quickly and join me on stage. I'd like to welcome Philippa RODSETH, who's the Executive Director of Manufacturing Circle. I have Dr. Anthony COSTA, Investment Program Lead at the Presidency of the Republic of South Africa. Siby DIABIRA, who is the Regional Director for Southern Africa and Indian Ocean for Properco. Dr. Stavros NICOLAOU, Group Senior Executive for Aspen Pharmacare. And Mr. Nkululeko MAGADLA, who's the General Manager for Southern Africa and CEO at Air Liquide South Africa. So everyone, please join me on the panel. Okay, I'm just going to adjust my chair a little bit so I can see you all. First of all, wonderful to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much. And I think the first question is, when you hear Busi share, you know, that picture of South Africa, which is real and which is frank, and yet it is infused with opportunity. I perhaps want to start with you, Stavros, to talk about, I mean, I think in its earliest days, Aspen, in its former incarnations, has been in South Africa since the 1800s. 1850, I believe it was, and then I think somewhere around 1997, you changed names and you became Aspen as far as in the way that we know it now. So there's a history of legacy and longevity in the investments that are rooted in South Africa, to use Jacko's words. Why? Amidst all this tumult.
Firstly, thanks very much, Program Moderator. Let me also thank the French Embassy, led by the Ambassador, the South African French Business Formations. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here today. I'm going to provide a slightly different slant. Not that I'm going to contradict Busi in any form or shape, because her and I are completely aligned on this. It could have been a tape recording if you had asked me to speak on the country. I very well much have recorded the same message. But let me give a slightly different picture around the things that work in South Africa. I think Busi's given a reality check on where we find ourselves as a country. So let me give you some of the positives. And because I'm from the medical sector, you've asked me to comment on Aspen. Something that struck me during the COVID pandemic is how South Africa's medical, scientific, and manufacturing excellence shone through. So let me give you a couple of examples. Firstly, we were the first country that was able to requires significant scientific capabilities, a high degree of scientific prowess. I know that we were punished for it because there were transport restrictions and travel restrictions imposed upon us. But nonetheless, you cannot detract from the scientific achievement. Secondly, we were the only country in the world. Thanks very much. Am I more audible? Okay. We were the only country in the world to host the largest, what we call phase 3B COVID vaccine implementation study. 490,000 patients, and the entire world benefited from the South African data. Now, if there wasn't a vote of confidence in our medical sector, we would never have got the brief to do that study in the first place. I think that's a fantastic achievement, a wonderful feather in our cap as a country. Then let me focus on my company, Aspen. So, Aspen was the first company on the African continent in the Southern Hemisphere to manufacture the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. That was the preferred option for the African continent. Incidentally, there were a list of 10 contract partners that Johnson & Johnson selected. Aspen was number 9 in the ranking, but we were able to leapfrog the rest and produce first. The rest of the producers, incidentally, were all in the Northern Hemisphere. So what am I trying to say to you, colleagues? I can go on, there are many more things I could cite. We don't have the time. What is my message? My message is that in the midst of the reality check that Busi gave us, there are also pockets of excellence that give a lot of hope. And Jacko is completely right. We don't build an economy around hope, and neither are we pretending to. But I think we are illustrating those pockets of excellence. And that's where investors need to have a look. And it is from those pockets and those sectors of excellence that we are going to slowly rebuild our economy. And that's what the aim is here. We know where the fault lines are. There's an aggressive push, particularly from the private sector. We have a very robust and resilient private sector. We will do our bit to rebuild and reconstruct the country and to open up the opportunities that Busi so eloquently presented. So let's, as a parting comment, any would-be investors here need to look at those pockets of excellence, and you will find the South African business formations, whether it's BLSA, BUSA, BBC, very accommodating to try and identify where those opportunities lie. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that lovely opening, Stavros. So, as the program director, of course, I also have to be the headmistress. And because we're up against the clock, we can't do a slow roast. We're going to have to do some popcorn in the microwave. So I'm hoping we cover the themes as quickly as we can. But what I do want to say to everyone in the audience is that any of our panelists are available for a conversation in the tea break. This is a networking opportunity after all. So if there's something that somebody said that really piqued your imagination or fired your imagination, please feel free to reach out. All right, let's bring in then, and maybe Anthony, I'll just bring you in really quickly just to build on the picture that Stavros has talked about. The question really is around these opportunities in South Africa and in Southern Africa through your lens.
Thanks very much, and I think thanks Stavros for giving that example of the healthcare and pharma sector. The topic of the panel is around rebuilding South Africa after COVID-19, and I think what we've seen is that South Africa's emerged in many ways stronger than we feared at the beginning of the pandemic. We've seen that in the macroeconomic data, which paints a picture of a country that's in a better fiscal position. So we've enjoyed the benefits of a global commodities boom. As a result of that, we've seen our first quarter GDP come in slightly better than expected. We've seen our full year GDP being forecast for 2 to 3%. Not enough, but better than many countries around the world. Inflation, which is due to come out this morning, should come in at around 6% at a headline level, which again is better than many countries, including in the developed world. And we're seeing a potential revenue overrun, a balance of surplus in the balance of trade. So at a macro level, I think we shouldn't underestimate South Africa's resilience, partly the beneficiaries of good fortune on commodities, but partly also sound government strategy. We were aware of the debt situation. We were aware of the risks that we ran. And you may recall that in the beginning of the pandemic, in the early days, South Africa was downgraded along with many other countries. We've recently seen rating agencies, including S&P, review that. They revised their outlook to positive. I think that was quite unexpected, but it was a recognition of the sound policies that have been applied. So I think maybe just to set that as an opening stage, at a country macroeconomic level, we've got sound policies, they're well applied, and that creates a solid framework for companies to invest.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And, you know, talking about the numbers there, just in terms of our growth, it was coming off a low base. So some people said, oh, it's coming off a low base, that's why it's looking good. Is it going to be sustainable in the long term? And can we, you know, obviously we can't reach for the double-digit growth in this environment. I mean, which country in the world really, with our context, can? But how much stronger can we reach and shape up over the next year to 2 years? So we might circle back to that question a little bit later on. But Siby, I want to turn it over to you and Properco, and tell us from your vantage point where you see the recovery in South Africa and the opportunities.
Thanks, and good morning to all, Sawubona. We are very happy to be here. I mean, from a development finance institution, and just a few words on that, maybe as, I don't know if everyone knows who is Properco, so just to take a step back. So Properco is the private sector arm of the French Development Agency. And our mandate for more than 40 years has been to be investing into the private sector in emerging countries. And Africa is our main focus. And Southern Africa and South Africa is today one of also our main regions where we do invest. So we, as we'd like to say thank you also from my colleague to discuss about from a macro perspective, from the healthcare perspective, because as a DFI and as a foreigner and as an investor, we see a lot of opportunities. We see the challenges, and we know that we cannot rely only on hope, as it has been mentioned, but we see opportunities, and this is the mandate that has been given to us by France and by the French Development Agency. So we saw opportunities, I would say, every single day on almost all the sectors that we are covering. From a FI perspective, and during the COVID and during the crisis, we do believe that we had to play a very contra-cyclical role, and our role was also to look at where are the key topics. And the first topic that we did mention and we did see, it's also our main sector, which are the financial sectors. And the banks also came to us and said, how can DFI also strengthen the liquidity? So very quickly, we did provide some liquidity to the banks. We did provide also to strengthen and to be able to look at the SMEs and the MSMEs, because as we all know, they are also the heart of those economy, and they are the heart of where we should build. So this is, of course, for us the main topic in terms of FI, but then we also did expand, and I think Aspen is a good example that we did look also into the sanitary and condition. How can we strengthen also our intervention into the healthcare sector, into the infrastructure, and as a collaborative approach, and I think that for us a very key topic is to work collectively, both as a Team France, as a Team Europe, but also with the local DFI here in South Africa, in the region, to provide some significant solution.
Thank you very much for that, Siby. And again, we'll circle back to that notion of collaborating in risk, especially, you know, in an environment where things change and change rapidly. Philippa, and I should have done that actually in the beginning, is let you say a little bit about, you know, the company you represent, Manufacturing Circle, and then tell us from your vantage point where you see the recovery and the opportunities.
The Manufacturing Circle is a voluntary industry association that is the voice for manufacturing in South Africa. We see challenges, we see the flip side of challenges as opportunities. And to cite an example, talking to Stavros's opening, Stavros sits on our EXCO in Aspen capacity, as does Jean-Claude of Saint-Gobain. And we were called, I think it was 16th of March, Stavros, 2020, by our Ministers of Trade and Industry and Health to say we have this crisis coming. It's a tsunami. Do we manufacture ventilators? And our answer was, no, ministers, we don't, but we believe we can. So in a period of 6 months, we came up with a reference specification using the best doctors in a public hospital as the clients. We worked with, well, the team of engineers who built the square kilometre array, represented by the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory, came up with the project management, the systems engineering. We got money from the Solidarity Fund and manufactured and deployed 20,000 non-invasive CPAP ventilators in a period of 6 months. So to Stavros's point, the challenges that we experienced in terms of a change in global value chains, we couldn't rely on those necessarily anymore. We are incredibly agile. We are problem solvers. These pockets of excellence, I would love to see more as become centers of excellence, areas of excellence, but that is a small example of what we can do. Talking to rebuilding the economy post-COVID and those learnings, nothing like a crisis to focus attention. I see 40%, 46% to Busi's point of unemployment as an enormous crisis. And that is something that needs huge focus and attention. If we speak to the key issue, it's growing the economy. How do we create more demand for our manufactured product, which then enables us to grow the economy using the, the enablers of the infrastructure fixes. So that is really, simply put, growing demand and enabling that through manufacture is something that we have great opportunities in. And to close, as an example, energy is a wonderful one, because on the one side, we have demand for additional energy. So that's something that can grow our economy. And from a supply side, those manufacture opportunities can also enable extra jobs, extra growth. So we need to look at that on a case-by-case, sector-by-sector, project-by-project basis, implement project management, project manage, and work as between government and industry to see what we are good at and effectively execute.
Philippa, thank you very much for that. And of course, in the realm of unemployment, which you talked about, Busi, the expanded definition, the youth actually occupy the highest level of unemployment in our country. So again, it can be seen as a burden, but also an opportunity that can be catalyzed and used and deployed into this economy for the good. And Nkululeko, again, welcome, and maybe just a little snapshot of what you're up to in South Africa. And I know particularly during the COVID period, there was a lot of opportunity to do good things here.
Yes, so Air Liquide, just to start off with, Air Liquide, we probably the biggest manufacturer of gases in the world currently. And insofar as COVID is concerned, as far as the economy is concerned, I think it's quite easy to dwell on what is not working. And there's a lot that's not working. But it's also important to understand how we individually can play a role in fixing that which is not working. I think the last point that was made about not being complicit, I think, is a key one for me. But let's just talk about COVID and how we experienced COVID. What COVID brought to bear, and Stavros made the point, was the extent to which we could pull together as a country, whether it was in the vaccine space or in the oxygen space. Just to give you a sense, at the height of COVID, oxygen demand was sixfold what it is, with the same production capacity, with the same logistics capacity. And we had to make sure that we could, in fact, meet that demand, because not meeting that demand meant people died. We were able to do that. We have the skills, we have the deep skills in the country, and it's skills that we can build upon. We were not only able to do that, but we were also able to export oxygen to India when India had its own peak in the pandemic. So key for me and key for us as LECHEVALLIER is what can we do to build on the core skills that we have in the country already? What can we do to build on the core capabilities and core resources that we have? So if you take energy, oxygen production is hugely energy intensive. Therefore, energy is a key issue for us. And unless we invest in green energy, unless we partner with others in investing in renewable energies, we cannot come back and say, well, the country is not working. We understand electricity is constrained. What can we do as corporates in partnering? And the last one, the world is at an inflection point. So the evolution to low carbon hydrogen is real. It's an opportunity for us as a region to play into that space. But we cannot play into that space unless we borrow from others, unless we collaborate in risk-taking. And so from an LECHEVALLIER perspective, yes, lots of problems, yes, lots of challenges, but also exciting things, great skill level, great resources in the country, and there's a lot to play for.
I'm going to come back, and thanks for that opening. Going to come back to that opportunity to collaborate or to see around the corner, effectively, in a context where things aren't working out well and we're in crisis mode. I think Aspen, did that really well in terms of, when it came to the pandemic and saying, we'll set up a manufacturing hub here. I mean, the rest of the detail is not as germane to the point I'm trying to make, is the fact that you saw an opportunity, you saw a need, and you were able to put roots in the ground around a need that South Africa had. What does it take to do that in our environment in South Africa? Do we have the agility to respond to challenge almost immediately and get things done?
Thanks. I think that's an excellent question and very pertinent to, I think, where we want to take this panel discussion to at the end, right? Let me start off by saying local capacities solve local problems. So if there was ever a doubt, and I'll come back to the agility and the nimbleness in a second, but if there was ever a doubt that we need to localize and industrialize this economy, okay, COVID brought that point home very sharply, and it was stark in many instances. And we saw that because we were at the back end of the queue with vaccines and many other things that were needed at the time. And in your hour of need, countries are going to look after their own populations first. So if you don't have those existing capacities, those existing capabilities, you can never pivot, whether it's at a time of emergency or public health crisis, or whether it's pivoting an industry to take advantage of an opportunity that presents at that point in time. So unless we've got the capacities, the skills, and capacities and skills are interchangeable. It's no use putting up these capacities, and I've had this discussion with Sylvie many times, no use putting them up, but you can't sustain them, and then you lose both capital and skills. So to answer your question, what is it, and are we prepared as a country to seize either an opportunistic commercial venture, as happened with vaccines, or whether it's seizing a global dynamic that is presenting a commercial opportunity? We have to anchor all of those discussions in further industrializing our economy so that we can retain skills and build up and downstream activities. Without those, I'm afraid we can't respond to any commercial opportunity that presents. So localize, industrialize, retain skills, and apply capital appropriately. Thanks.
Thanks, Stavros. Anthony, to build on that then, and then I want to open it up for questions. I know that we don't have too much time, but I want to give you the opportunity to ask the panel a question. Is, for all the things that Busi has said and the panel has reflected on in terms of things that could be inhibiting factors in this economy, I want you, again, to just go back within the presidency to talk to us about the strategic vision that South Africa has to drive investment, to support investment in the country, and to play that partnering role.
So I think when you ask Madame Busisiwe MAVUSO to set the stage, she sets the stage. And quite forcefully and with great clarity identified issues, and we certainly wouldn't deny that those are all fundamental problems that we do face. I think if I can just quickly touch on all three, by recognizing those are issues, government is addressing them. So around the network industries, we have in particular Operation Vulindlela. I think Jacko touched on that earlier. The work that they're doing around energy reforms, the increase of the self-generation cap, assisting Transnet with the opening up of the railways as well as the ports. The spectrum auction, also a key network thing, something that's been stuck for over 10 years, recently was concluded successfully, raising 14 billion rand for the fiscus in the process. So the government recognizes the problem, is addressing that. The question of local government and local government capacity, also a key challenge. We have the district development model, and that's one of the mechanisms that we're using to try and capacitate local government. And then finally, around corruption, there's a recognition that there has to be accountability. So the publication of the final volume of the Zondo report is imminent. You know, we should see that out in the next day or so. The president is committed to coming back with an action plan by October. That report is not going to gather dust. There will be steps taken as a result of it. We've got a new police commissioner appointed. There's a new independent director in the MPA following the departure of the previous one. So government is taking steps. We agree we could be doing more and we could be doing it more quickly, but we certainly do recognize the problem and are working on it.
All right, so there you have it. We've done a scene set as best as we could in the time allotted, and I would love to give you the opportunity to ask a question. There's a lady in a beautiful red scarf there. Anyone else? We can get some mics out to you. Just please identify yourself and for who your question is. And there's a lady over there as well with a blue mask. Or a gentleman, I'm sorry, I can't see that well from over here. All right, let's go ahead.
Hi, Iman, you don't recognize me. It's Kareshni Naidu.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
Nice to see you, darling.
Currently president of the Middelburg Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for the panel. Hi, Philippa. I also know Philippa RODSETH. Government and how we can recover from, I'm talking as representing businesses in the Middelburg area, which is coal mining area, as we all know. Plus, I have a small engineering company currently, which is struggling to survive. This has been said a lot, and our president came out and said it. Government does not create jobs. Small business creates jobs. I know because I took a company from 1 employee to over 120 employees, and from an EME to a generic in under 5 years. Government's got to create an environment for business to actually succeed and to be able to operate. We're not doing that at the moment. I know people who've had problems with SARS because of the 2020 chaos that we went through, whose tax clearance certificates were pulled and they could no longer do business. But SARS offices are closed. Why aren't government officers all back at work? I'm asking Mr. Costa there as well. Department of Labour, try to get your letter of good stuff. It's really hard. Business needs all of this stuff in place in order for it to work. Government's not helping me. I know personally, I've dealt with it. And the third one, and I'm talking as, I've got my CEO here from the Middelburg Chamber of Commerce as well. We were one of the best run municipalities in the country, clean audits forever until 2020, and now we're one of the worst run. We had no water for 2 weeks. You try running a business with no water in your company for 2 weeks. And we've got a Twizzler, if anybody knows Twizzler, it's like the South African rival to Coca-Cola, who came to Middelburg because we had the best, one of the best run municipalities in the world. They couldn't operate because we didn't have water. Yeah. So we've got to take care of our local government, Mr. Costa. That is absolutely essential for business to actually thrive and survive. Thank you, Iman. I'll come and give you a hug in the break.
Thanks so much, Kareshni. All right. Sorry, I'm so sorry, sir. Go ahead. We're gonna get a mic to you so that you don't have to strain your voice.
My company is Sufficient Grace Trading. My question is simple and direct. Normal times from before COVID started, we're being heard about the red tapes. The problem is that a lot of foreign direct investors and then local investors, they're speaking about the investment that they have, but the problem implementation to invest that money that they're spoken about. so that we can reduce, grow the economy, so that we can reduce this unemployment that is happening under the ground. Until we address that and we reduce those red tapes, like now the president has employed somebody in the office that is going to look in on the red tapes.
That's Vulindlela, that's Operation Vulindlela.
Yeah, we see that person, but we don't see any reduction of those red tapes. Many places, the department and many private sectors, we struggle with the red tapes. It's an elephant that we've been speaking before post-COVID, but it's not being addressed, well addressed. Let us let the panel address that, how we can reduce that, how can we access even the funding in the marketplace.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the question, Oscar. Philippa, I know you want to come in, but Anthony, you're going to come in as well. So we'll have the pair of you respond to that first round. Go ahead, Philippa.
On the issues raised regarding municipal service delivery, as the manufacturing circle, we are very aware of those by way of electricity infrastructure and water infrastructure. For our manufacturers, factories are located in municipalities, and that is where the rubber hits the road. It's not possible to manufacture as far as, if you've got a continuous production facility and inconsistent electricity. So for us, again, talking about the challenge becoming the opportunity, by way of example, the investments, pledges and commitments at the investment conference are hugely important. Because those, talking from a manufacturing perspective, are tangible investments, long-term investments. They're about factories, expansions, new factories, and the importance of municipal service delivery and infrastructure is critical in that regard. And there again, the skills and that private sector can bring to assist in improving infrastructure and bringing the skills that need to be deployed are very important. So there are solutions and in so doing assist in better improving government service delivery at a municipal level and have that tangible fabric of the investments of the of the factories, of energy, energy factories, agro-processing, etc. So acknowledging that it's definitely a challenge and a point where the rubber hits the road, but there are solutions, and the investments pledged and implementing those are hugely important in rectifying and solving the situation.
Thanks, Philippa. Anthony?
Thanks, Iman. Maybe just to begin with the second question around the red tape. So absolutely, the President did make a commitment in the State of the Nation earlier this year to address red tape, and he announced the formation of a red tape reduction team, so separate to Operation Vulindlela, based in the Presidency, that's going to work with the existing departments, in particular the Department of Small Business Development and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, both of which have programs to try and reduce the red tape as well as assist businesses that are struggling, and that includes working with provincial units. In particular, the Western Cape has had a long-standing red tape reduction unit. So that work is underway. It's Mr. Tembinkosi. He started working. He's not a full-time employee. He just works part-time, much like Jacko, and we've got a team assisting him, and that work is underway with a view to providing a report back by the next State of the Nation on what has actually been achieved. So we're aware this is a massive area and there are expectations, and we are working on it. In terms of the challenges faced by small businesses, it's obviously distressing to hear. Clearly, small business is the growth engine of South Africa. Removing red tape is one way of supporting small businesses, and one of the reasons why Mr. Nkosi was appointed, he is the chair of the Small Business Institute in South Africa. He's an experienced business person in large and small business, and so he brings that perspective, which is important in the red tape element. But we clearly need to do more. So the point around government offices being closed is absolutely fair criticism. I think you did allude to the reports around COVID restrictions being lifted, and hopefully we can get there. That's certainly something we need to push on, and I wasn't aware around the office closures. That's something we'll look into. In terms of local government, part of the challenge is the constitutional structure of South Africa and the spheres of government. So we have local, provincial, and national government, and each one of those has its own rights and duties, and if you like, its autonomy. So there's a limit to what national government, and in particular the presidency, can do in terms of intervening at a local government level, and a process that needs to be followed for failing municipalities where you put them under administration, etc. So it's not an ideal situation, and it's certainly not a quick fix. The preferred solution is to work with local government to capacitate local government. That's where COGTA and the district development model comes in and is so important. We recognize that there are clearly challenges, but it's something that together with the province, the municipalities, and the appropriate national departments, and I'd mentioned the DTIC as well, we recognize and we are working on.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I won't be able to take another round of questions just because I'm trying to manage the time. But as I say, I invite you to connect with our panelists at the end of the session. Siby, this is an area you know well because you are working. Part of the work and the outreach work you do is with small businesses cross-sectorally in South Africa.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks again for the question. I think, as mentioned at the beginning, the SMEs financing is something that is very at the heart of our mandate. And maybe to give you also a perspective, is we do face challenge as well on how do we reach the final beneficiaries. And one of the example of saying that we are able to provide financing, but financing is not the only thing that we can do. And implementation is definitely something that is at the heart of what we have to do. And what we did also and what we are looking is everything which is linked to the extra financier. And to give you an example is that we did work with the Standard Bank for the last couple of years, and we did manage to provide to them what we call a risk-sharing mechanism, because we saw that from a Standard Bank perspective, they did have a strategy, and they do have a strategy to continue to accompany and to continue to support the SMEs, to continue to support SMEs. And they also raised the question of how can we do more? And so as a DFI, we did look at it together and said, what can we do also for you to provide more financing to the SMEs? So what we are doing is sharing the risk between Standard Bank. So Standard Bank is facing the client, and we are on the backstage, let's say, to look at what we are taking some of the risk, and they can provide and fund more SMEs. And to be able to implement that as well, I think it's important for the SMEs to know that this mechanism exists. So we are also looking at technical assistance for them to also support and to provide also advice on how can you provide to that so-called program that will be faced by a bank like Standard Bank. So we are doing this with other financial institutions in the region, and we do believe that also to rebuild the economy, it's something as DFI that we need to pursue and to provide more guarantee and to go also directly more into SMEs mechanism.
Thank you so much for that snapshot as well. Nkululeko, your perspective then on these opportunities to collaborate, broaden the footprint, bring in local players.
Yeah, I think, so 2 points. I think the first one is that as we develop, as we collaborate, we cannot be blind to the societal issues. So we cannot leave anybody behind. And so collaboration is not just about NGOs, not about government, etc. It's societal. It's deep societal. I think it's a key part for us. The second part is understanding what we have today, what we have built, and what our capabilities are will help us understand what it is that we can collaborate on. Of course, we need government, NGO, regulators, etc. To be in one in making sure that it's an enabled environment.
Just a quick one, your honest observation of how enabled it is from your experience.
Let me give you an example. I'll give you a typical example. Height of COVID, and the one afternoon, load shedding is going to hit. Height of COVID. Load shedding happens, our plants go down, you cannot provide oxygen. It's a very difficult situation to be in. It's a very practical situation to be in, right? And unless we can make sure that, hopefully we don't have a wave like that, but unless we can make sure that the environment is enabled, and it is being enabled increasingly, but it's enabled for us to invest in renewable energies, just as an example, but collaboratively with others. It is very difficult to imagine that we can sustainably grow our economy going forward. That's just a practical example of something that we went through.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, we're always going to be challenged in panels like these, and I know these great panelists that we have always feel frustrated. I didn't get to everything I wanted to say, but Stavros, I'm going to give you the last word on this panel as we close it. Again, to bring home the message of what is good, what exists, and what the opportunities are. We've spoken already, I think, quite comprehensively about our recovery in the country. We've given you a couple of milestones that you can look at. But just end it off for us as we get the plane off the runway, Stavros.
Iman, thanks very much. And as you say, very difficult when you're confined to an hour to get all these points across. But what struck me about today, because we're speaking to a room here of investors primarily, and investors want a reality check in the first instance, which I think they got from my colleague Buti and many others in the room. So what we should take out of this session is that South Africa acknowledges where the fault lines are. There's significant transparency, I believe, around that. I know, you know, the good thing about being at Aspen is we operate in around 60 markets globally. And in fact, we South Africa's largest investor in France. Our experience is good in France, but it's not so good in some other countries, right? I can tell you now. So other countries don't have the media freedom, the strength of the judiciary, as much as the judiciary is being criticized at the moment. I think we have an independent judiciary. I've seen far, far worse. We are transparent, and we've acknowledged some of the fault lines. So if we want to take something out of today's panel, is that we have a robust and resilient private sector in South Africa. And it is that private sector, speaking to Ms. Nika's question, is what do you do as a small business? You're in an unenviable position, right? You don't have a balance sheet to sustain what you're trying to get your businesses going. And I think we're going to rely heavily on partnerships moving forward. And I saw this during the pandemic. I saw it with Business for South Africa, working with and alongside government. We moved mountains. So my only advice for those small businesses, aside from the policy interventions, which I don't think we've fully exhausted, like we, for example, have not, Iman, we have not fully utilized the public spend to trigger and stimulate black industrialists in our economy, for example. So public sector spends 1.2 trillion rand, maybe 500 billion of that is in salaries and benefits, but the rest is goods and services that get procured. Now we need to, as do many other countries around the world, we need to use that wisely, invest in the right areas to stimulate these small businesses and black industrialists into the economy. So my final thought around a key message here is that South Africa is robust and resilient. We have a fantastic private sector. It is looking and is working together and alongside government. You've heard and read a lot about a social compact. I know there are some delays, but there are not too many countries, colleagues, around the world that I know where during a height of a crisis, we banded together and put a solidarity fund up between the private and the public sector, and that saved many lives and livelihoods. I don't know too many countries around the world where you enter into a social contract like the president is looking to enter into at the moment. And that allows the private and the public sector to come together with one common vision, one common goal. And our common goal should be transform and grow the economy. And I feel private-public collaboration to our investors. Look at where those opportunities lie and where they sit, because that is the future trajectory of the country. Thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure, Iman, being here with you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So what we do know in this environment is that investors are looking for scale. And there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from the East African business community in terms of how they go after and pursue investments as a pack. So in this next session, we are going to explore the importance of positioning our region as an investment destination of choice. We, I think, so far already have a keen understanding of the hurdles that we must overcome, such as the varying levels of infrastructure development, the incompatible economic and political systems, and some of the uneven benefits of integration in our region. But as has been made over and over, the point's been made that these are opportunities to transform the challenge into something that can be financially viable, feasible, and profitable in the end. So let us get focused then on what it takes to unlock the opportunities as a region. And I would love to welcome somebody I respect very much, the Commissioner of the South African Competition Commission, Dr. Tembinkosi BONAKELE. Warm round of applause, please. Okay, you know, I take everything.
That's fine, I have mine. Thanks very much. This is how things start going wrong when people call you a doctor when you are not. And then you keep quiet. Thanks, Iman, for that wonderful introduction. But seriously, I'm not a doctor. As a matter of fact, I did register for a PhD, and I'm a dropout officially. So I did have the ambition. Thanks very much to the organizers of the conference for inviting me. I know we don't have time, and I'd like to follow the previous speakers in acknowledging all the guests and paying our respects to them without mentioning all of them by name, but I particularly want to single out those who come from outside South Africa. You are all welcome here, and we are glad that you came. And we also appreciate the hospitality of the French ambassador and his delegation. I'm the first speaker from government here, so and I was listening attentively to all the grievances against government. I'm sorry to tell you that I come from the Competition Commission, which is a competition regulator in South Africa, and that means it has very little to do with government. However, I think that as a South African, at least, I need to tell you about what's going right in South Africa. When the ANC went to the United Nations to campaign against apartheid and calling for sanctions, our leader of the ANC at the time, O.R. Tambo, addressed the UN. And everybody was moved by his address. We all know what happened after. The UN did respond positively. And the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Big Botha, was in the audience. And when he got an opportunity to respond on behalf of South Africa, he said, well, you've all been moved by Mr. Tambo's speech, and he is complaining about how blacks are treated in South Africa. But he is the product of the South African education system. So you can see how we are treating our blacks from his eloquence. So, on a serious note, the one thing that we are really proud of in South Africa is the education system. I think some of the speakers have referred to this. Mr. Maree spoke about our higher education system. Stavros was talking about our research capacity in the area of health and medical care. We have a lot of that in higher education, I would confirm. There is only one Elon Musk in the world, and it is the South African public education system is the only system that produced an Elon Musk. So I think we have a lot we can build upon. We have the rule of law. The reason why we speak so much about corruption in South Africa is that we are actually unearthing it. I don't think it is the worst in the world, but it's probably the most talked about, locally at least, because we know about it. Our institutions uncover it. And we expect that it be prosecuted and processed through an independent judiciary. So the case for investment in South Africa from a rule of law perspective is very strong. Of course, we have deep financial markets. Again, Mr. Maree did talk about our financial system, our banking system. We are also having a fairly advanced manufacturing sector. You've all heard about that. And that is backed by a labor force that is capable of producing. You have a debate which is going to be led by the Deputy Minister about that, so I won't talk too much about it. It's got challenges, but South Africans are producing. And this is why you have international factories here producing high-end products for local consumption, but also for exports. In the auto sector, in some of the engineering areas, a lot of light manufacturing taking place. We've lost some ground, but we still have immense capacity and potential. We have problems in some of our infrastructure, but it remains the most advanced in the continent. The most advanced road network, the rail system and harbors could be managed better, but it's there on the ground, that infrastructure. Communication systems of all kinds, a fairly modern network for all sorts of services. So the case for South Africa in Africa is very strong. But there is more. South Africa, as you know, is one of the countries in the African continent who have signed up to the Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is a huge potential, and as we see ourselves as a gateway into the continent, we think that this provides not just South African companies, but for all investors who locate here, and of course elsewhere in Africa, to access this market of over 1 billion people. Africa is one of the economic frontiers yet to be unleashed. Many people, when China started, were very doubtful. They were doubting its capacity. They were doubting what it's able to produce. We all remember how people used to mock its products. People used to mock its laws. People used to talk about how it doesn't protect intellectual property, and so on and so on. But some people knew that China was a frontier to be unlocked at the time. And those who are doing very well, even in this country, were some of the early investors in the Chinese economy. So our confidence in the African story is not in any way misplaced. It is bound to take off this economy and this continent, because the world cannot afford to have an Africa that doesn't make its own contribution, given the amount of natural resources that it has, that the world needs. Now, I come here as a regulator, as I've indicated, and I've already spoken about the rule of law. I don't want to leave you here without talking about some of the important topics in the area of competition law and regulation in South Africa. We as regulators, particularly as the Commission, see ourselves as really a support system for inclusive growth and to deal with some of our legacies. And one of our legacies is a highly concentrated economy. We have a choice to make in terms of how we deal with international partnerships. We could say we are all open. Anyone who has a shovel must come in, find the next pit and dig and go. That story we know we are used to. That is the story of our past. Unfortunately, it's the story that continues to play out in some of our northern neighbors. The story of foreigners, particularly Europeans, who come in, dig and go and leave only open holes. Or we could say, we don't want to see foreigners at all here. We are closing our borders and we wallow in ignorance and poverty. We will not take either of these paths. They are paths to nowhere. We are seeking partnerships that are based on mutual respect and mutual benefits. And for that to occur, we need a very predictable, clear regulatory systems with do's and don'ts. And this is what my organization, this is partly what we do, Petition Authority. So there are positive roles we play to ensure that the economy is dynamic and competitive for investments. When you want to invest, you want to make sure that the markets where you come in, the barriers are not so high that you can't come in at all. But at the same time, you are able to grow freely as a business, to expand your market share, to sometimes even swallow some of the entities that are failing. South Africa is a modern economy when it comes to all of those. We do also have, of course, a legacy where we support the inclusivity of the economy by bringing in SMMEs, small and medium enterprises is a big focus of ours. Historically disadvantaged persons, so blacks, women, as we seek to expand the reach of investments. I also don't want this to be a surprise when you come to the commission and we ask you about this. When you have a transaction, we will ask you about how expansive is the reach of your investment in terms of communities, in terms of workers, in terms of black people, in terms of women, but all of these happen in a regulated environment. We have guidelines that apply to these. So when you are not sure, you can consult the guidelines. There is Invest South Africa office. It also offers advice on these. They are just next door to us at the offices of the DTI. They are also very helpful. But if you cannot find joy in websites and everything else, you are also welcome to contact us. You are welcome to make contact with our office. We offer free advice. So if you have, a lot of people go to lawyers, that is fine. That is how transactions are done. A lot of people go to lawyers, but sometimes it is better to approach the authorities directly, because I sometimes feel that there can be some misunderstanding and some scaremongering. Remember, lawyers still must also make some money, and they have to sometimes scare you a little bit so that you can consult someone. So that is fine. But government is open, and I want to emphasize this to especially the French companies, some of whom are new in our environment and may not be familiar with our regulatory system. You can talk directly to government. And I want to also end this by emphasizing that what we see ourselves as is an agency that supports inclusive growth. And in that context, it is important for South African businesses, including black-owned businesses, because we've had to deal with this topic, that in markets, some will succeed and some will fail. It is not our duty to make failing firms succeed. It's a marketplace, and the best must win, because only when the best win are we able to experience growth, investments, and employment. So our approach to regulation is balanced, is predictable, and is informed. It seeks to address the objectives that I have outlined above. I don't want to go further than this because I'm already getting signs that I have exceeded my time. But thanks very much for this, and I'm looking forward to the panel.
Dr. Mr. Bonakele. Thank you very much. Again, I wish we had more time to listen to what is being said by the institution he represents, because you don't want to fall foul of, becoming too big in a cannibalistic way in an economy like ours. Inclusivity and mutual profitability are the terms of the day. So I've got a huge challenge ahead of me. I'm going to bring our next panel up, and you might see us transition in the middle of the panel, and I'll bring in my colleague from ENCA, Gareth Edwards, to take over. But it's an important one. If you look at the topic, we're talking about investing in Southern Africa. We need to focus on intra-Africa trade and regional integration. And if you didn't know, intra-African trade right now, that's Africans trading with Africans, is at a paltry, I think, around 12%. Other countries, particularly the Americas and Europe, are investing at a rate of 50%. So we certainly have a lot of scope for more investment partnerships to take place, and that's what we're going to focus on in our next panel. So let me bring to the stage the Minister for Agriculture, Water and Land Reform from the Republic of Namibia, the Honorable Calle Schlettwein. And then I also want to welcome, we can all come up as I announce your names. And then Mr. Hervé Perron, who is the Managing Director of Bellore Logistics. I hope, again, I'm pronouncing this all good. Niall Rowantree, who's the Deputy Vice President for Southern Africa for Total Energies. Lello FRANCISCO, Board Member at Apex Angola. And Ms. Yolisa KANI, the Chief Business Development Officer at Transnet. Do I have everyone with me? And I feel bad for everyone on this side because I have my back to you, which is so rude. There are lots of other spaces here. Did I leave Michelle? Michelle was actually at the top of my list. I'm so sorry. Michelle OLCKERS, who is the co-CEO of Mazars. So thank you very much. And I'm going to try and move my chair as well so that you can see everyone on the panel. All right. So again, I'm in the invidious position of making sure that we stick to the time. So I want you to think of 3 images. I want you to think of a photo, I want you to think of red tape, and I want you to think of a key. So the photo is who you are, and what you're doing whether it's only in South Africa or across the African continent. And the red tape is some of the obstacles that you're seeing very early on. And some of you, of course, have been operating in this region for a long, long time. So you have more of an institutional view of where the problems have been. But the keys then is what I want you to end on, is what are the opportunities that promote regional and cross-continental investment. So, Michelle, please, pardon, s'il vous plaît, I'm so sorry, and I'm glad to have you open our panel. Thank you. Hello. Are you okay?
Hello. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Iman, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Just quickly about Mazars, we operate in 90 countries globally. We're an audit, tax, and advisory firm. Play a very important role in facilitating investment across the region. We operate out of 22 countries in Africa and another 4 territories that we support. And what's really important to us is our role that we play out of South Africa, which is still the powerhouse of, as you've heard today, operating into Africa. A lot of businesses choose to start here in South Africa, and we like to facilitate that growth for businesses. So you spoke about red tape, and obviously as an advisory firm, we deal with a lot of clients who come to us with a lot of challenges and issues. And I know from hearing just some of the comments out of the room, red tape is definitely what inhibits a lot of the growth in the region. What we've seen is that, with large businesses coming into South Africa, what we want to see more of, which I think is the key, is to supporting the SMEs. So large businesses come in, they want to grow and expand into Africa, have to be inclusive, have to play their role in alleviating poverty, creating inclusion in the continent, opening up those borders. The policies we have really helped start the progress on that. The trade agreements really are there to support that growth. But at the end of the day, when you start businesses in Southern Africa, it's really important that you as a business support your local SMEs. So it's not just about how sustainable your growth is for your business. It's about how sustainable that growth is for the economies that you're working in. And there's no doubt that with the huge levels of unemployment in South Africa, there's a great opportunity for businesses to employ youth, to employ women, which will really create that economy, which is the economy of the future.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Oh, you might. 3, 2, 1. I'm happy to have
Thank you. First of all, I'm great to be here, and thank you for having me here. From Angola, and I represent IPEX, who is a public institution, who is in charge to promote private investment. And also, when we say private investment, is local investment and also FDI. And we also support companies to implement projects in the country. And we also promote exports. And we help local companies to find new markets around the world. So, and for us, these 2 years are very exciting for Angola country. We are recovering. We first had 5 years with the recession, but since last year, the economy is providing good signals. And for this year, we be confirmed that we'll be growing again. And the best for us is that this growing is pushing by no oil sectors. As you know, we are oil producer, and during this time, we are oil-dependent economy. But now our focus is to diversify the economy, and we start to grow in no oil sector. That is very, very, very important for us.
Thanks so much, Neil.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Niall Rowantree. I'm a Scotsman working for a French company in South Africa. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm representing TotalEnergies. We are a global energy company representing 7 different energies, many of which actually we are involved in South Africa and across the Southern Africa region, traditionally in oil and gas, which we may be best known for, but progressively more and more into the wealth of renewable opportunities that there are. So in terms of your question, I'll go on opportunities first. For sure, with 60% of the best solar resources in the world, and so far only exploiting a tiny fraction of that, renewables represents a huge opportunity for us in the whole Southern Africa region, but also the opportunity for economic growth across all the value chains. I'm joined by colleagues from our general trade or B2B business, and what TotalEnergies needs is a wider economy doing well. If our extractive industries, if wider industry is succeeding, then so is TotalEnergies. So for sure, the opportunity for growth across this region, one of the strongest potentials for growth in the world, is very exciting for us. In terms of blockers and red tape, was the second picture, right? Ours is a relatively simple business. We buy products, we move them around, and we sell them, okay? Fundamentally. And what we need for that is good infrastructure, people with skills, and solid rules and regulations, so that we know broadly what price we'll be able to sell things for and the environment we're going to be operating in. There are probably some challenges with each of those enablers. People with skills is for sure one, and even we're talking about intra-Africa, the mechanics of having the right skills. We have people with skills in parts of Africa. We've essentially had to abandon trying to transfer someone from one of our affiliates to our Mozambique affiliate because of the challenges, the practical almost impossibilities with moving that person with the right skills who was there to try and transfer those skills to locals. So for sure, the visa systems and the challenges with moving people with the right skills between and across borders here is a real challenge. Maybe we'll hear more about it as we go on. But it's a real pleasure for TotalEnergies to be here and for myself personally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Minister? Carl?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and be part of the panel. I'm probably the odd one out. I am a minister from the government of Namibia, representing or having the portfolio of agriculture, water, and land reform. So that's the photo of me. My country is a member of SACU, that's the customs union. My country is a member of SADC and the SADC Free Trade Protocol. We are members of the AU, and we have ratified the Africa-wide Free Trade Agreement. We have free trade agreements with Europe and the UK through EFTA and a separate agreement, and with Latin America, and we have got market access into China and the USA. So we are well connected. But when we sit in conferences like this, and with due respect, I take the example of the head of the Competition Commission. When we talk about we want to attract investment into South Africa, I would enjoy if they say we want to attract investment into SACU. When we talk about integrated trade and we go into fora of SADC and SACU, we should not fight for national interest. We should fight for the common good of the integration. Now, I believe that I'm right when I say that COVID, especially, and now the war in Europe, has knocked back the ambitions of integration. It has knocked back globalization and free trade, and it has put more emphasis on self-sufficiency, closed borders, inward-looking policies. As a small economy, we pegged our hopes into economic integration. We pegged our hopes into economic integration and regionalism because we are only 2.5 million people. So we need a bigger market. We need an export-driven economy, but with stricter borders, with national interest prevailing, we will not achieve that. I'm also a fan of Liverpool.
Uh-oh.
And I believe in the saying, we never walk alone. So don't try to walk alone.
Minister, you know you're going to get yourself into trouble with the football, football fans we have in the room. Thank you so much for that. Can you move seats? See, it's happening already, guys. We're not going to get regional integration if this is happening on the panel. This is a theme, of course, we're going to come back to just in terms of what Carl was saying. Carl, if you don't mind, if I use your first name, around where does the intersection come between national interests, regional interests, and then continent-wide interests? When do those move forward and lean back a little bit? Hervé, I'm going to hand it to you next.
Thank you. I don't know.
I think we need to give you the microphone.
Is it working?
Yes.
So I'm a big supporter of the PSG in Fleury. We didn't achieve well this year. So I represent the Bolloré Group. We've been maybe with, yeah. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I represent the Bolloré Group. The Bolloré Group has been established actually in Africa for a very long time, almost between 30 to 40 years, depending on the countries. In South Africa, we've been here since 1994, so it's quite a long history for us. And we are across the continent. We have subsidiaries in 50 countries. So when you take Africa, basically, if you count the number of countries you have, we cover pretty much the whole continent. We know what I've just heard and what I hear from our customers is that actually, yes, the challenges are, from a logistics standpoint, very important, no matter the country in Africa, but even more important here in South Africa. Reason being is that we are at the entrance of a corridor. So the Durban port is not only meant to be used for import and export from South Africa, but to cover the whole region, the SADC region, but even further. So if this corridor doesn't work, that becomes a logistics challenge that we're facing to deliver services for our customers. It works very well in South Africa, and the infrastructure is very good. As it's been said before, there's no equivalent in terms of road infrastructure in South Africa. So when you need to move a container from Durban into Johannesburg, it takes less than a day or a day, which has no equivalent in the rest of the continent. The main challenges that we're facing are more related to all the neighborhood countries in what we call the cross-border. Because the minute we cross the borders, then comes the challenges in terms of customs clearance. Even though we're part of the SADC, it still remains a big issue, a major issue. The traffic on the road, so the train and the rail infrastructure would be a major relief for us should we use a railway from South Africa into the rest of the continent, as it's been done actually when you look at the example of China, where they developed what they call the Silkways from the east to the west, which works very well. So a lot of challenges, but South Africa being and Durban being the #1 port on the continent, the potential to develop is huge, it's massive. After the COVID, which we believe we're out of the COVID now in terms of business, we see the demand growing dramatically, and we see some logistics challenges coming our way. But we feel there are some solutions and quick fixes that we can address in order to make the overall corridor easier to access.
Thank you so much for that snapshot, Hervé. The final word, of course, on the opening is to Yolisa KANI from Transnet.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Yolisa KANI. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer at Transnet. Transnet is a state-owned freight and logistics company, and we're Schedule 2. In other words, we don't get government guarantees. Everything we do, we fund from our own pocket, which is a challenge in and of itself. But I think most important is the fact that we have 8 operating divisions. TFR, which is the Transnet Freight Rail, being our biggest one, with over 30,000 kilometers of the rail network. 1,500 of that is dedicated to heavy haul. We'll speak to the challenges just now. We have our Port Authority responsible for 8 commercial ports, Transnet Port Terminals, which operates 16 terminals across 7 ports in the country. Then we've got our pipelines as well as our Transnet Property Company, and I'd like to believe we're one of the biggest asset owners in the country. Now, in terms of our challenges, and I'm really excited about the 2 questions that are already posed by my fellow panelists, because there are solutions to the issues that they've raised. I mean, part of the challenge is that our balance sheet is quite constrained. We don't have a bottomless pit of resources that we can go and say we're walking in there, we're going to invest because we have the experience and we've got the resources. It's no longer the case, unfortunately. That's number one. The second challenge, I mean, linked to that is the fact that there's a lot of cargo that we're leaving to the road hauliers because we just don't have that capacity. I mean, these problems are known by anyone. It's everyone, rather. It's out in the open that we've got a shortage of locomotives. We've got an issue around theft on cable theft and our infrastructure being vandalized. I mean, those are the key things that keep us awake at night. Be that as it may, there's a huge opportunity for private sector collaboration and partnership. I mean, we've already opened ourselves up in terms of the 2 ports, the Durban port as well as the Ngqura port. We've invited the private sector. We've also invited the private sector to come in with their own rolling stock onto our network, which is part of Vulindlela. So I'd like to leave it at that, Iman, but great opportunities that lie. I like how Dr. Bonakele put it. He said there's a case for South Africa in Africa, not just as Big Brother. The opportunities are there, and that's why we have a newly revised Africa strategy as Transnet. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for those openings. I mean, the one thing that's going to dominate, well, not dominate, but kind of take over a large piece of how we move the conversation forward is where does the African Continental Free Trade Agreement sit, or area sit, within the regional integration that is possible. We know that I think Namibia has already just signed an ICT agreement with Nigeria over the last few days, so that's something that's bubbling, and the opportunities are starting to open up. We want to see, as someone made the point earlier, how South Africa, as this portal of entry into the rest of the continent, can really maximize on that position through not only the institutional investments that you have made, but some of the new investments that will come on stream as well. I'm going to pop my head out for a moment and hand over to my colleague Gareth Edwards, who's going to open the floor for questions, and then I'm going to see you back again for the afternoon session. Please treat him as nicely as you've treated me. Gareth?
Well, I don't think you need to treat me as well as Liverpool supporters. I'm a Manchester United supporter, so I'm not sure how well we're going to get off the market. Hello, everyone. I'm Gareth Edwards. Thank you, Iman, for joining us. I'll tell you why I'm so excited to be here, because Iman and I do this for a living on news, and I have missed seeing all of you, human beings, in the room. Zoom is great, but it's getting a little bit older. It's wonderful to be with all of you. I'm flying in at the last moment. So there's a couple of reasons I was very excited when the team asked me to be involved. I do interviews every single morning on ENCA. And you know what I hear? Talk shops, planned engagements. There are talks of talks. And finally, we're in a room with leading experts on the continent, in the industry, getting something done. So thank you very much for being with us. I believe we're going to go to the question and answer session. I seem to have the easy job. Iman's done all the hard work, and so have you. Thank you. Is there somebody who would like to start the Q&A? I have one. We also have a roaming microphone as well. We'll have about 20 minutes or so on questions. Sir, thank you very much. I feel like I'm at a bid. We'll start with you. Just your name, where you're from, and your question to who.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Cindy Mzamo from the sector of global businesswomen. My question is very simple, but I think maybe it can be addressed by any panelist. We are talking about the implementation of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. And I think the Minister of Namibia, because this has to be addressed by government. Government must create an enabling environment for business to thrive in the continent so that the implementation is effective. Now, we're talking about issues of, trucks that are blocked in borders, issues of trade agreements that are not finalized, and issues of small businesses that are not going to be able to actually move their goods up and down. When we talk about from Cape to Cairo, what do we mean, Minister, from Namibia? A practical term of actually making sure that these SMMEs will be able to actually take their goods from Cape Town to Cairo through the implementation of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, and government must assist us. Thank you.
That will be the first question. Well, I think, Minister, would you like to answer first, or shall I get a few more questions? Let's just get a microphone for the Minister. Here we go. I think what we'll do is we'll take one question, one answer at a time, if that's okay with everybody. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that question goes to the core of what we need to do. The Cape to Cairo concept from Cecil Rhodes is nothing else but an effort to integrate African countries into eventually one market. But that integration is only beneficiary if the value chain and the gains out of that development is shared equitably along and between the African nations. It cannot be that one country is the leader and gets all the gain and kind of swallows the others, uses them as a springboard for own gain. That is the problem. So you ask what governments must do. I agree. We must make the border crossings more efficient, easier. In fact, if we want to integrate completely, we must take borders away. I think we can take great cues from the EU, where value chains like the manufacturing of Airbuses is shared by different economies. That must happen here. It's not happening. We are sitting in boardrooms and talking about integration, but we don't walk that talk, and that is what we have to do. Real integration means we must give up some sovereignty, but for the better of our people, so that SMEs can be linked into the value chain, so that we solve our logistic problems. It is still more difficult to bring a container from Namibia to Kinshasa than from Namibia to Beijing. Why is that? We must invest in infrastructure, and we must jointly do that. It must not be delinked. And if we do that, if we develop a port in South Africa, the effort should not be to outcompete Walvis Bay, but to complement the efforts that we can then jointly be a better service provider in the region. So there is a lot of emphasis on what governments must do. The ease of business is a big topic, but I believe that the development of infrastructure and the development and assurance of the enablers, that is secure water, secure electricity, and secure traffic and road transport, are enablers that often fall off the map when we talk about investments. That is also where private sector has opportunities. Thank you.
Mr. Francisco, I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. Minister, we could pass the microphone over, or do you want to add into that before I move to the next question on the right-hand side?
Yes, Angola, I think, could play an important role on this issue because we have a very blessed position in the continent. We can connect the north to the east and to the south, and we have a very good infrastructure. We have a railway connect the west to the east, come from Benguela to Zambia. It's very important, and we have an important project to connect the South Angola to Namibia. Also, for all this integration, the infrastructure investment is very important. And we know that, for example, the DRC is a very rich country in mining, but the logistics is a problem for them. And we, in this country, we have this position, and we can help this. And we are one of the countries have signed up the African Continental Trade Agreement. Yes, that's right. So I agree 100% with Minister said about this issue.
Are we happy with that? Okay, I did see one question to the right-hand side. I'm not sure where our microphone is. There it is, coming to the left again. If I can just ask for your name, where you're from, and who you're addressing your question to. Hello.
Good morning. My name is Oscar. My surname is Mola. My company is Sufficient Grace Trading. My question is why other African countries we don't do a system that they can able to make a trade one another business faster. Like I was happy when I see on TV media when I see Lesotho make it e-customs, where they can make it a system to run faster. We don't know if it is being started. Maybe it's been something that's gonna be started. And then I was happy to see that it's gonna help us business guys to be able to do good, sending goods, to trade one another goods faster than when we go to when it does a personal applications at the border. It takes long. Is this one to check this document, to check this document. I think if maybe we can run a system model that when we do we can be faster to access the documentation, to access even the product to go to that client.
Is there a particular person you'd like to address that to? Because I'm feeling this is a Yolisa question. My
questions are why we don't African countries we do a systems that can be access to. It can be addressed by one of the panel there. We can access of documentation can be that easier online, and also so that it can limit the process of process at the borders, so that it can be faster for the product to reach that client.
Okay, I feel like this is a trans-border transport. I feel like I want to pick on Yolisa. How much of you want to pick up on this? Bully, pick on. We'll send the microphone. Anybody else, of course, wants to climb in on that, but I feel like this is a logistics transport technology question.
Yeah, I mean, to a great extent, but I mean, in as far as the freight and logistics is concerned, I mean, there's so many initiatives that we are embarking on. Let's just zoom in on the North-South corridor. I'm afraid I might not be able to speak to the documentation at the border itself. But I mean, one of the problems we have with the North-South corridor is that it's got a potential of 1 million tons of cargo. And we're doing not even half of that. And there's a number of reasons to that. There's a big one, which is the infrastructure that has already been mentioned. It's the South Africa, which is okay, and then Zimbabwe, and then it goes until we get to GRC, where there's absolutely no rail infrastructure. But what the initiative that we've embarked on, it's an old initiative, by the way, as a North-South corridor from the DRC all the way up to the port in in Durban, we've started engaging with each and every one of those rail authorities to say, how do we solve the problem of bringing cargo back onto rail? So there's a number of things. One is dealing with governance, because on that corridor, it's every man for himself and God for us all, and it's not working. Even in the manner in which we approach our customers, including the planning. So what happens in the DRC, you get to Zambia, then it's starting all over again. You bring in fresh locals, fresh crews, and then it goes again until a trip that is supposed to take however X number of days takes double the amount of time to do that. And we are hoping that with the railway authorities having bought into the idea, we've also developed a white paper on governance. We're hoping that pretty soon we'll get the political buy-in, and then we start attacking the corridor as we should. One of the initiatives that it's work that was done by the World Bank and the NIPED Business Forum was to say, at some point we need to try a block train that will move the cargo from one country to the other without stopping. The same is with Mozambique and ourselves as Transnet. We were speaking to our CFM, which is the counterpart for Transnet Freight Rail, to say, actually, when you're bringing from our mines in Palabora to the border or to the port in Mozambique, that train should move all the way from the pit to the port, and we grant them the same rights from Mozambique to the port, either in Richards Bay or in Durban. So there's a lot of work that has gone into this, and we're just hoping that at some point we get it right, because it has been in talks for quite a number of times.
I think before we move on to perhaps a third question, I'm not sure if someone does have a third question before we wrap up for now. The question as well was around the technology of this. What does the technology look like for businesses moving between borders? And perhaps if I can stay with you, Yolisa, for the moment on that, because we're talking about logistics, the management of the movement of goods. Technology behind this, is there a way to make it easier, make it more seamless? The minister was talking about borderless. What does the technology look like?
100%. I mean, look, if I speak from the top of my head, I think there's absolutely none happening right now. If a train moves from one country to the next, there is no telling where the train is, where the cargo is. I mean, the turnaround time of those trains is appalling, actually, for a simple reason. You don't know once it's crossed the border where else it lands other than where it was supposed to go as its final destination. So we actually have piloted something about 2 years ago that would look at tracking those trains, but it goes with the documentation. I think most importantly, though, the opportunity that came with COVID is that you don't have to have people coming physically to the offices to file papers. These are things that can be done online. But I do think therein lies an opportunity for digitization rather of the sector.
Before I look for a third question, I'm not seeing any more hands for now. Any other, one of our panelists want to weigh in?
Just to quickly fully agree and concur to what's just been said. In South Africa, the system is quite modern, actually, because we can go for customs declaration online, and you can track your, should it be import or export. Then comes the challenge of the interconnectivity of the customs authorities along the chain. And I think one of the solutions would be the train, because as you just said, a block train from say from South DRC down to Durban, it goes all along the way and there's no custom stop. Today, when we go across borders, don't know if everyone knows, but when you go to a border post in Botswana, it can be a small, tiny border post like you wouldn't imagine. There's a queue, which we call a queue, but it's more of a traffic jam of up to 40 or 60 kilometers of trucks that are waiting for their turn to clear the cargo. So not only it's a matter of congestion of the whole region, but it's putting a lot of pressure as well on the logistics as a whole, and on the competitiveness of the logistics, because a truck that's not moving, it's costing money. So it's increasing the rates, and it's making the whole region not as competitive as it could be when you look at, and I will just finish on this, there's 3 corridors actually that we look into in this region. One is Durban, which is supposed to be the best. The second one is going to be Beira and Maputo, again to access to the interland countries. And the third one, which is very competitive, is Dar es Salaam. So we evolve in a region which is actually where 3 corridors are competing against each other. And I think, again, we have the best infrastructure here, from here to the region. It's just a matter of connectivity.
Mr. Rowantree, I think I saw your name up as well. We'll end on this one.
Britain, where I'm from, has a lot to say sorry for in this region, but we're giving you something now. It's a live example of a slow motion car crash of our decision to leave a free trade area and a customs union. And what you're seeing is the potential breakup of our country over border checks and regulation at border lines between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And you're seeing real and lasting damage between our trade with between Britain and the wider European Union. And it's to your question, Oscar, the reason for that is standards and regulatory divergence and differences. And the opportunity that the Africa Greater Free Trade Agreement gives you is, and they're doing it in tranches, you know, looking at different segments. The more people look at Africa from the outside and see one place, but it's very heterogeneous, huge differences between countries, but the areas where you can start finding some regulatory and standards alignment, that's how you're going to then start to speed up and when technology can start coming to pass. But so long as there are plurality and heterogeneity of regulatory standards, you can't really take advantage of those technologies. But Britain is giving you an example of how great a free trade agreement is and the problems there are with leaving it. If that's Boris Johnson.
I think he's giving you a hint. It's time to wrap it up. I'm not sure if Michelle, you'd like to just climb in before I say goodbye on this. I feel like I haven't spoken to you yet. Hello, Michelle. Perhaps you have a comment on either of the two questions before we end this particular session.
Yes, thank you very much. I think really importantly here, and I think Niall, you've just really focused in on that. It's the cooperation. When you've got these free trade agreements that are now coming into play, it's finding the commonality and putting the pieces together to actually build on that. Things are not just going to happen because the trade agreements are there. It takes every country, every business in those countries to work together to create the environment that then creates that development. And for me, what that really links well into is sustainable growth, and then coming back to that IT perspective, we spoke about South Africa having, the great skills in terms of IT, and definitely something that we can hone in on to create an environment where, again, we create that growth through development of IT skills in our country, which then can foster through into Africa, where, again, the skills are there, they're just not being developed.
Yeah. It's the lack of development of the skills, the technology is there, the will is there. It's how to put it all together. I'm going to say thank you to the entire panel. A round of applause, please, for our panel. There's going to be a whole bunch more of this. I think Mr. Niall Rowantree wrapped it up very nice. When you start hearing beeping noises on set, we all start panicking a little bit. Mr. Niall Rowantree, Tembinkosi BONAKELE, Hervé Perron, Lello FRANCISCO, and Michelle OLCKERS, and Yolisa KANI. There's going to be a lot more. We're going to take a couple of minutes break. Please get some coffee. There's a lot more to talk about. We'll be with you in a couple of moments. All right, I've actually just been informed you're going to have to wait for the coffee unless you need to take an urgent water break. We're going to come back in just a moment from now. We're going to be taking a look at a very, very big, important discussion. It's a new approach, building skills for the future. How wide-ended is that? What skills do we build and how quickly do we build them? Perhaps take a very quick stretch your legs break. We'll be back in just a moment. Just walked in. Hello, I'm Gareth Edwards. I've taken over from Iman Repeti. Thanks to the organizers for asking me to come through. I mentioned this earlier. It's so great to have so many panel discussions. I don't often get the chance on ENCA on the morning show, the most watched morning show on TV, by the way. I just want to put that out there on South African television, to have these long-length discussions. I'm sure many a time I've spoken to many of you in the audience, many of our panelists, but not in such depth. And this is why I'm so excited to be here this afternoon as well. So in case you are wondering, if you feel like you need to take notes, this is panel 3, a new approach, building skills for the future. If you feel like you're in the wrong lecture, like at university, and you want to sneak out the back, that's okay. I'll give you like 2 minutes. I won't judge you. Anybody in the wrong class? No, we're all in the same class. So good to have you with us. We're going to take you through our panel of speakers in a moment, but I would like to ask for the introductory address this afternoon to be done by the Honourable Deputy Minister, Buti MANAMELA. What is a skill? That is what we need to try and address today. What is the skill? Who has the skill? Where does the skill exist? And once we've discovered all of that, what do we do with that? Do we have the Honourable Minister with us already? I did see, there you are. Hello, how are you? A round of applause, please, for the Honourable Minister.
Okay. Can you hear me? I can't hear myself. As long as you can hear me. Thank you, Program Director, and let me also extend my greetings to the panel and a few dignitaries, including the Minister of Agriculture. It was such a pleasure to listen to you, and I hope that some of the commitments made, continued commitment made in order to strengthen both our countries' relations and also ensuring that we make ease in terms of trade within Southern Africa and also the continent are taken through. But also, if they're still here, the French ambassador to South Africa and also the chairman of the French South Africa or the French South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry and also the French Trade Commissioner, if they're here, and most importantly yourself, who are part of this very important engagement between Southern Africa and France business, and so thank you for inviting me. The business and investment relations between South Africa and France are well established and demonstrated by the presence of over 370 subsidiaries of French companies across key sectors of our economy, employing over 65,000 South Africans. And so we do not take this engagement very lightly. Now, with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were all forced, both government and also various other social actors, to radically rethink a number of things that are critical to our continued existence as humanity. And part of the things which we had to do is obviously to rethink the question of skills and skills development and what we need skills for. Firstly, and I think agently, for individuals' human development, for people to have a skill in order for them to make a variety of decisions that affects them, that affects their community, society in general. And so that's quite agent. But secondly, and more importantly, we need skills to contribute towards a strong public sector, strengthen public service, strengthen the judicial system, issues around safety and security, and a whole range of other issues that involves how an effective public sector should operate. So we think that that's quite agent skills in that regard. Thirdly, and I think more importantly, the skills demanded within the private sector in order for individuals to pursue their entrepreneurial initiatives, or for both national and multinational companies to utilize those skills in order to continue doing business in our country. And there's a whole range of myths that have been associated with the challenge of the South African skills development regime, and some of those include the fact that our universities are not producing the kind of skills that are required for the market and for the economy. And we think we, may have a challenge in terms of unemployed graduates, which I think was standing at 10 to 11%. The last time Statistics South Africa released their numbers, make them public. So we think that that's an exaggerated problem. In fact, the appropriation of our graduates, we believe remains fairly high, and that it's something that we are obviously committed to continue seeing happen. In fact, one has a better advantage in the South African labor market if they have some form of post-school education and training qualification for them to be employed or towards self-employment. Also, that there's a huge skills mismatch, which we believe, yes, remains a bigger challenge. And we see a lot of young people either dropping out of universities or TVET colleges, or changing their academic fields of choice, or upon completion, some of them deciding to pursue careers which are completely different from what they've studied for. And that's my function of career guidance than a function of the education, of the post-school education and training system itself. But of the other myth is that our TVET colleges remains, with this myth that there hasn't been much that has been done in investing resources to change the face and direction of our TVET colleges, so that the graduates who come out of there are able to immediately join the labor market or pursue entrepreneurial initiatives without any further investment in their skills needs and all of that. And we think that that's a myth which we want to continuously engage with. There has been significant progress done with regards to our post-school, with regards to our TVET colleges. The number of those who have enrolled, I'll speak a bit on that now, has significantly increased. Our partnerships with the private sector, in getting students from the workplace into our TVET colleges, but also deploying students from TVET colleges into the industry, there has been a significant increase in that regard. And the level of employability of our TVET college graduates is gradually on the rise. And yes, there are certain things that needs to be fixed with regards to the system, but comparatively speaking, 10, 15 years ago to date, we believe that a lot more has been done. So I thought I must just start with, addressing what I believe are why we urgently need skills, particularly post-COVID, but also what are some of the myths that are associated with our post-school education and training system, which are not necessarily related to what the facts say on the ground. And so this doesn't mean that we're not continuously rethinking our skills strategy. And therefore, this rethinking of skills becomes even more urgent if viewed in the context of the disproportionate impact that we have experienced through COVID-19. And yes, there was this message that was emphasized that, COVID-19 does not treat all of us unequally, whether you're rich or poor, employed, unemployed. But we began to see some levels of inequalities emerging based on the kind of jobs that people were doing. And so this means that we have to and had to rethink our approach in terms of skills development. And so as part of the global economy, we're also adversely impacted by this COVID-19. And it has been particularly adverse on our youth, but also on our women, as we've seen with the quarterly labor force survey, where unemployment amongst young people have been on the rise, but also young people are not in employment, education, and any training institution, that number has also been on the rise. And as part of or central to the intervention has been our government's economic recovery and reconstruction plan, which sought to coordinate a set of interventions by government, but also mobilization of both the private and civil society. And this has been aimed at making certain improvements in reviving the South African economy, ensuring we create an enabling environment for citizens to rebuild their livelihoods and for businesses to operate normally. And in support of this, as the Department of Higher Education and Training, we then developed interventions using our expertise in science, technology, and innovation to enable our country's economic recovery and reconstruction plan to continue. So we ask the key question, this is the economic recovery plan that the President launched. What are the set of skills that we need as a country to ensure that we help to propel the economic recovery? And as is the case with skills, and as is the case with a whole range of sectors, but in this case, skills, that we may not be able to move rapidly to catch up with the immediate demands that are imposed by the various challenges that we're confronted with. But we thought that it's better that we begin identifying what those skills are and start getting our post-school education and training institution to move towards that direction. We thought that part of the things that are agent should include the collaboration between the private sector and our public institutions by deployment of more than 10,000, at least in the first year as announced by the President in his State of the Nation address, 10,000 unemployed TVET graduates in workplaces at least by April next year. And we want to see some commitment, at least from French-based and from South African French companies in working with us in this regard. But also further to this, we have set a number of targets to expand post-school opportunities, including increasing the number of students that goes to TVET colleges, which is now closer to 600,000, but also increasing the number of students that goes to universities, which is standing now at 1.1 million. So expanding the opportunity to study further has been one of the crucial interventions that this government has made. And so critical to these targets is fostering collaboration between the public and the private sector. And so that's why we've seen more than 71,000 TVET college graduates being placed for either workplace integrated learning or for work-based learning experience. And the old thing that you can't have a student coming out of a university and straight, of a TVET college and then straight into employment. That's a thing of the past. And yes, most of the students who go to universities, we're still going to have that challenge wherein, through our sector education and training authorities, CETAs, and some of the programs that the private sector have developed, and I hope that some of the panelists will tell you about those, which help in preparing our graduates for work readiness. And it is part of a historical anomaly which we're trying to deal with, that students who should have ordinarily went to a TVET college, and not because the old thing that says no, they can work with their hands and this and that and all of that. We're trying to unsubscribe to that ideology that those students who go to TVET colleges should only be those who can work with their hands. We think that most students actually who go to university shouldn't have gone to university in the first place. Whether they are straight A students or not, it matters not, because the anticipation is that they're going to a post-school education and training institution to prepare themselves for the world of work. And it can only be in a TVET college where that happens. So as long as we are still unable to deal with that, if you ask any South African parent, they'll tell you, look, I want my child to go to university because of the prestige that has been afforded to most of our universities over TVET colleges. So we're thinking that we're turning that around with the increase in the number of students who go to TVET colleges, and hopefully we will be able to meet our targets set in the National Development Plan of doubling the number of students who go to TVET colleges, compared to those who go to to universities. So we're quite eager equally to see, private sector participation in terms of the work readiness programs of students, especially those who graduate from universities. And so I'd also like to acknowledge, I think, the important results which continue to be achieved by the South African Institute of the French South African Institute of Technology, which is at the Tshwane and Cape Peninsula Universities of Technology, in preparing the next generation of South African electric engineers, including for satellite engineering. There's also the French South Africa Agriculture Institute, which built capacity in the agriculture and food security academic and research programs. Disadvantaged institutions, at South Africa's historically disadvantaged institutions, as it relates to science, technology, and innovation, there are also a whole set of interventions that I would want to briefly speak about. The revitalization of existing sectors and industries. We believe science and technology focus has been moving towards that direction, but also the exploitation of new resources, of economic growth, the building of a capable state, and support for broad-based broad-based education and skills development. And so key among these is our contribution to ensuring energy security. We launched in February the Hydrogen South Africa Roadmap, which seeks to guide the country in creating a new growth sectors while transitioning to a carbon neutral economy. And I think the commitment that France has made in working with us as it relates to Just Energy Transition Partnership, as announced at COP26, is really appreciated. And therefore the hydrogen economy will be a key focus area of this cooperation. But also at the same time, we are continuing to work with the work to modernize existing sectors, such as mining, and I think issues around mining safety, increased productivity, I think many of you would know, was that central to keeping us away from an economic recession during the pandemic and a whole range of other crises that we faced in the country, was the mining sector. And so we're mobilizing the national systems of innovation to focus in helping us to keep our mining sector as productive as it should be. So the policy framework, we believe, is provided within by our white paper on science and technology, which sets long-term policy direction for our government to ensure a growing role for science, technology, and innovation in a more prosperous and inclusive society. And so to enable the implementation of this white paper, we've also adopted our Science and Technology Decadal Plan, which seeks to place a national system of innovation towards increasing positive impact on South Africa's socio-economic and environmental priorities. I've been avoiding eye contact with the program director. I've been doing that quite successfully. But secondly, to maintain the equilibrium between impact and continued investment and development of the national skills innovation. And our decadal plan builds on the foundation of our national system of innovation and centers the system to specifically address societal challenges and contribute towards accelerated knowledge and knowledge, digital and innovation-driven, inclusive, sustainable socioeconomic development. And so it focuses on issues such as climate change, future-proofing education and skills, reindustrializing the modern economy, future of society, as well as our science, technology, innovation priorities, which is health, innovation, and energy. And there's just a whole range of policy interventions that that our national science innovation landscape seeks to put forth. And I hope with these few remarks that we're able to that I was able to give you a broad sense of what is agent in terms of our skills need, what are the things that we're doing in order to address some of those, both in the short and in the long term, and hopefully have been able to appeal as it relates to public-private partnership, but the role of the private sector in contributing towards the skills that they themselves need in order to make not only our country, but their own businesses work. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much indeed to the Deputy Minister from Higher Education and Training. Nothing scares a Deputy Minister or Minister more than a program director. Not even news anchors and journalists can scare a Deputy Minister. So we're going to go straight into our conversation this afternoon. Do we have a microphone? We do have a microphone. So what I'm going to do, for those who've just joined us this afternoon, we're going to talk about building skills for the future. And I'm not sure who would like to start with this. I always feel it's just great to climb in. Who had a giggle? Who had a laugh? Who snorted a little bit when the Deputy Minister was talking about TVET education versus university education? That's what you said. So which is better? Is there better? Are they different? Who's brave enough? Who wants to put up their hand? Who wants to go with this one? There we go.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte Mukwena, the Executive Vice President for Human Resources and Stakeholder Relations at SASOL. I also would like to maybe introduce myself as well as the chairperson of the team that's coordinating the setup and running of the Energy Council of South Africa, which was launched last year, which is a council that brings together the players in the energy sector, both SOE and others in business. Position itself as the voice of the sector. And I will going to respond to that question in the context of a sector, which is something I'd like to table, that we need to move to collaboration and partnerships that are sectoral. In that way, we are able to guide the work that is done in the education system to produce skills that are required for the sector and for our own businesses. Universities versus TVETs, I do not believe that it is versus. It's actually both. We focus in partnership with the education system as SASOL from early childhood development all the way to postdoctoral research, and it has really contributed significantly not only to SASOL but to our ecosystem and our value chain in terms of skills. So the TVET colleges, participation of business, we need to partner as a sector, or even as this particular formation that we are participating in, and identify how do we support TVET colleges to produce the skills that we require. We have had high absorption rates, as SASOL, as the Deputy Minister was saying, because we participate in curriculum design, we participate in teacher education, participate in the infrastructure in technical schools that is required for the learners to use to study. So we have contributed to also putting technology in universities that we as a sector and a business require, so that the engineer that graduates, or the graduate that's going to go into engineering, or the ones that graduates for TVET colleges, are particularly training ready. We tend to want them to be workplace ready, but they're usually training ready, because the kind of specific solutions and services as well as technology we use in the private sector is not necessarily always present in the TVET colleges. So 50 TVET colleges in the country, it's not possible to extend our resources to all of them. However, Deputy Minister, and maybe us as business, we need to cooperate in streamlining which TVET colleges will support which sectors. I know it'll force our students to move across the nation, but we are not necessarily a very big country. If we support students to go to specialized TVET colleges, then we will, as a sector, cooperate better in ensuring that we can put our resources in those. But the cooperation of the private sector with the education system and within ourselves, sectorally or even regionally, will lead us to be able to influence the kind of outputs that our education systems give. So we need both engineers and TVET graduates, and we need to support the education system to bring us the skills that we require.
I'm seeing two. I've got a microphone. Thank you, Olivia. I've got two nodding heads. So who shall I start with? Zanele, Zanele, would you like me to start with you? Yeah, let's do that.
Great. So I think just to add to what my colleague has said, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zanele Dalglish. I'm the Director for Sustainability and Academy for Schneider Electric in English-speaking Africa. So Schneider Electric is a global energy management specialist, and we are absolutely passionate about education. And I couldn't agree more with what my colleague from Sasol has mentioned, in that Schneider Electric has a very broad education program. First of all, we focus on education of youth and specifically skills development. And Deputy Minister, I'll get to the TVET colleges shortly. And we also have an academy that we've established that looks at supporting established engineers, consulting organizations, as well as our customers. And also, once again, right from grassroots level, we also have early childhood development programs. What we really believe is critical in South Africa is looking at innovative solutions and how we can automate energy within the academic environment. We really take a very key position on taking our solutions and technologies into universities so that we have engineers that could be ready for future skills and future jobs. And in TVET colleges, we invest a lot in having the technology that is required for practical training. So what we have seen in the training centers where we have partners, specifically in TVET colleges, it's often either a lack of skill in terms of training the trainers on how to utilize the technology, or first of all, having the technology available. So Schneider Electric, with our foundation, have invested a lot in making sure that we could bring this technology available for practical training. And then, of course, also, there's quite a lot to accompany with that in looking at gender equality, bringing more ladies into the training programs, as well as also life skills training in how they would transition from an academic environment into industry. In addition to that, we also have established a Center of Excellence with the French Ministry of Education, Higher Education and Research, where we are testing hypotheses around the entry level of education, in that we have many youth that aren't able to access these training programs because they might not have the maths and science requirements to enter into the programs. And we have a beautiful center called the Center of Excellence, which is part of the French South African Schneider Electric Education Center network of education programs, where we take youth into the program based on their motivation to learn. We do maths and science teaching with them, a lot of life skills training with them, and really understanding those more basic needs and requirements that they have to be in a learning environment and then transitioning them into the work environment. So I absolutely believe and agree with what my colleague from Sasol has said, is that both are very important, different point of view, but really what's important in South Africa is for us to also prepare our youth for future technologies, the kinds of solutions that we would have in future, sustainability, digital energy, and we really have lovely digital artisan programs and solutions available to promote this from Schneider Electric's side, and welcome many others to join us in the sector, as collectively we'll make the best impact.
Zanele, thank you very much. Round of applause, I think, for our first two opening comments. I'm so glad you mentioned digital energy. I think Trace TV, I think, is one of those that has taken that, Olivia, and has made it very clear, not what it means on paper. You've visualized what digital energy looks like.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I can see that the people that were sleeping a little bit woke up, so congratulations. That means that this panel is bringing a new energy, not digital, but live energy to the room. So I'm Olivier LAOUCHEZ. I'm the co-founder and chairman of Trace. Some of you may know Trace. We are, at the very beginning, we started as a media company. We've got TV channel, radios. About 10 years ago, we created a foundation, the Trace Foundation for Youth Success. And along the way, we realized that the key priority for young people, especially in Africa, was to get a job. And to get a job, you need to have skills. You need to have either TVET education, university, or many of them, in fact, will create their own job. And we realized it was not that easy. Less than 20% of African youth will go to higher education. So 80% of them will have no TVET, no university, no higher education at all. So most of them will be self-employed. They will work in different agriculture or different jobs that they will create themselves. So this is a reality that we have to take into consideration. And this is why also we decided to really tackle this challenge and create a new platform which is complementary to TVET or to universities, which is a digital platform. And we form around ourselves a coalition of partners, including Schneider, including L'Oréal, Visa, MasterCard, Bureau Veritas, many French companies, including the French government also, that gave us a grant to do the pilot of this platform, which is named Trace Academia. And we are building, in fact, this platform here from South Africa, not only the technical platform, but also the content. We realize that part of the key challenge for young people regarding skills and jobs was first, most of the time they don't even know the jobs that are available. So we needed to also use our media power to educate them about the jobs that are available. And second, we needed to reinvent the narrative to bring education to them, because it's not easy. When you left school, you drop out at 16, 17, you don't have many opportunities to go back to a system where they will educate you. So we decided to use, in fact, their behavior, their mindset, their culture, what they like, and we use, in fact, entertainment, digital, and above all, the expertise of a coalition of partners. For instance, with Schneider, which is an expert in energy, and also with a lot of commitment in education, as you could see it, we have developed a particular curriculum so that these young people can get incentive, can get learning, can get interest in going back to education. And we use audiovisual techniques, we use storytelling techniques, like if it was a short video on TikTok or a longer format maybe on Netflix or Showmax. So we use all these type of techniques to really give them much more engagement, much more interest in going into this type of education. And eventually, the platform is not just to bring education and learning, but we try also to do the bridge with access to employability, because what people want at the end is skills for certain things, and these things are mainly jobs. So we try also to give them access to the jobs that are available, to incubators for the ones who would like to be in the entrepreneurship system. And we are focused on 3 different verticals: jobs, entrepreneurship, and soft skills. We consider these are the 3 really key elements that young people are looking for. And we are very proud, in fact, that with all this coalition of partners, we have now about 1,000 young people per day who register to the platform and go to the courses. So we launched the platform, we did a few pilots, it took a lot of time, it was complicated, but we launched really the platform about 1.5 months ago, and we are now doing a ramp up. We've got also partnership with mobile operators, and I can see that our colleague from Vodacom is here, so get ready to give us data for free, because data is a key challenge for young people to get access also to digital content. So we are very proud that we are building this platform here from South Africa with South African partners, with a lot of French partners, and we want to take this platform to the world, not just to the South African market, because the same realities that we have here, we can experience it also in other African countries, but also in Brazil and the Caribbean and many other emerging markets.
And I imagine it's those kind of skills that we need to try and figure out in a couple of years, Olivier, which is going to be, what is a skill that's going to exist in 5 years' time that doesn't exist now? And this is where I'd like to ask you to pass the microphone down to Raul to talk to us about Africa business development from Dassault Systems. And Raul, hello to you. So explain to me, what skills does Africa business development need right now? There's a room full of them. What do you need?
Well, thank you for the invitation, first of all. I would like actually to rebound on what my colleague said, and I'm for sure I'll address your question. It goes to what the Deputy Minister said. Public sector needs the private sector to contribute. This is a business forum, and we have a session on education. And there are now 3 or 4 private companies, maybe 5 here, that have all something to say, because we do something very concretely for education. Just 2 words, I represent Dassault Systèmes. We are a scientific engineering software company, and we serve customers who are in the manufacturing, infrastructure, and healthcare industries. All those 3 industries are shaken today by what we call the 4th Industrial Revolution, Industry 4.0, with profound changes induced by the advent of digital. And digital, the advent of digital in those industries is creating the need for those new skills. So when you're asking me what are the skills for the future, I would say that these are the skills that fundamentally will allow the Southern African young generation to harness the power of digital, and it's immense. So yes, it does in particular concern the disciplines that are known as STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But what I'd like to stress is the fact that the beauty of digital is that, let's face it, it's somehow cheap in the sense that it's not massive capital investment, it's digital. And as such, it creates the opportunity in this region for the young generation to acquire those skills that will allow to create products and services in Southern Africa, manufacture, build them in Southern Africa, and these products and services are to be consumed by Southern African consumers.
What about the
as well.
digital divide? Forgive me, but I agree with you.
But I would
What
like
about
to
the
continue on
digital
that.
divide?
Actually, the other beauty of digital is that it's also, there's this inclusive power of digital when it comes to learning. And I think what Olivier, you guys are doing is just a perfect example, all right? Because you break boundaries, you cross organizational boundaries, you cross gender boundaries, and especially in the STM disciplines, female students are underrepresented because of, historical prejudice and so on. And TVET colleges is where actually you can have female students approaching STEM disciplines because of the fact that they are not being helped by the advent of digital. And just one last word, give you another concrete example, and not to oppose universities with colleges and TVETs. For us, it's all in one thing. There's a continuous journey from the youngest age to older generations. And here as an example of France Southern African cooperation, in this country, that's the same. We have established a center of competence. It's not a center of excellence, but a center of competence at Durban University of Technology and Cape Town University of Technology to actually break this, or to bridge the gap between education and the needs of the job market. And what we do at these University of Technology is contaminating the surrounding environment to the TVET colleges that are also part of that ecosystem. So there's certainly no boundary to establish, but as a contrary, a very nice ecosystem, and again, the beauty of digital is that it creates continuity across these different audiences.
And I could see the hand going up on the far side from Vodacom, Mr. Matimba Mbongela, the only man who competes with me on TV for cooler socks, by the way. You know I'm going to ask about the digital divide. I saw your eyes when I said it. Your eyes lit up. Digital divide. Let's not pretend a lot of people have got the access that is needed for this. It's an ideal, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, my name is Matimba Mbongela. I'm the group head of HR for Vodacom across Africa, and it's a pleasure being here. I mean, look, I'm going to start with our purpose as Vodacom. Vodacom, we currently operate in about 8 countries in the continent, and our purpose is very clear. We've stated it in the public domain. We connect for a better future. So it's quite important for us to be clear in terms of all stakeholders that we engage in terms of where we start from with our purpose. With our purpose, we've got 3 key pillars. One is digital society, the other one is inclusion, and the other one is planet. So those 3 key pillars of our purpose drive whatever we do, from the strategy into how we engage with our customers. So let me talk a bit about digital society, which is your point. In terms of how we live with digital society, that we're very clear, and that's why, thanks to the Deputy Minister through the government in terms of the release of high-speed spectrum in South Africa, it's quite clear for us that for us to enable society to be digital, we need the right level of connectivity in terms of spectrum that we have in place. The important part is that in doing so, we make sure that we reach the last mile of the communities in rural South Africa or in rural Africa to make sure that we've got the right level of connectivity. I want to mention an example of something that has happened recently through the COVID, during the COVID times. We actually launched a platform which is well known called Connect You, and it was probably about 18 months old now, 2 years old, which basically zero-rated access to key sites for people in communities. And that zero rating included things like access, having to search for jobs. And it's quite important because to be able to enable that, you need the right level of access in terms of spectrum, and which has actually been able to help. Because in reality is that people engage with handsets more than anything else these days. So for us to do that is that we're quite clear in terms of making sure that our purpose comes to life. Interestingly, one of the good examples, and I'm glad to hear my colleagues mention the issue of early childhood access. For us to solve societal problems as private sector, we need not only to live in hope, but to put the hope in action. In our case, we know that even though we play in the high end of the economy, it's quite important to make sure that we create the right level of infrastructure at the bottom of the pyramid in the country. So we've got early childhood centers that we've got in place. Interesting, what we've done is that in those early childhood investments, We didn't look at infrastructure. We looked at how do we create the right level of connectivity in those centers, but also do what we call youth academic training, by training the youth in those local in these local communities to be able to have basic digital skills. One of the key examples that I want to mention, which came out of that, is that about 5 years ago, we started with a concept called Code Like a Girl, which was pretty much to say, how do we make sure that we give access to digital skills for women of the future? And in this case, we identified kids who were basically in grade 8. And at first, it was about 20 kids that we started with. Today, we've trained more than 2,000, almost 2,500 kids across the continent to make sure that they've got the basic coding skills to be able to participate in the digital economy. It's quite important because when you look at those things, you actually say to yourselves, you have to make sure that you contribute in building the digital society of the future. So digital divide, we've managed to create a solution with Connect You platform, like I said, but we've gone beyond that to make sure that we create the right level, the right framework, and the right level of platform for engagement of the communities where we operate.
And I deliberately have not left Professor Busani NGCAWENI this. I've left you for the end, Prof. We've got a microphone. There it is, Prof. Good to have you with us. How are you? Are you good?
I'm very well, thank you.
You got the name government in there. You know why I'm coming to you last, don't you? National School of Government. All the ideas are here. The plans are here. Help me understand, for someone who doesn't always understand the moving parts of all these industries, where does government come into this? How does government bring South Africa's ideas, France's ideas, South Africa's money, France's money, South Africa's opportunities, and France's opportunities together and make this all happen? Where's the red tape? Where's the stumbling blocks? And what would you like to see, Prof?
Well, thanks, Gareth, and all the organizers of this session. I mean, I come from a learning organization, so I had prepared a 70-page slide deck. And when I got here, I realized that I couldn't do it, so I had prepared about 7 bullet points, partly in response to your questions, but also covering some of the issues that were raised in earlier sessions. Firstly, the priority number 1 of the 6th administration is that of building an ethical, capable, and developmental state. Ethical in the sense that public servants, employed and elected, all of them, must be fair, must be transparent in the manner in which they are dealing with the public. And we can't take the issue of ethics for granted, because ethics can be taught, as we have seen in cases all over the world, that even if you become a director of a multinational corporation, you still be sent into a classroom, into a refresher, in order for you to understand what it means to be ethical, how to manage moral temptations and ethical dilemmas, because even directors of the biggest firms in the world do face those moral temptations and ethical dilemmas. Secondly, it must be capable in a sense that you need public sector officials appointed and elected who master statecraft. And mastering statecraft must manifest in the execution diligence, which means when permits have to be issued, they must be issued on time, they must be issued transparently, and you must eliminate the red tape. People who haven't mastered statecraft and the art of execution, they will take a year to process a permit that can be issued in 3 months. That is a sign that we haven't mastered statecraft and the art of diligence. And lastly, that is a capable state which must manifest in the quality of the decisions that you make. That you make decisions that are developmental because you are enable investment to happen. You are making decisions that are developmental in the sense that it is creating jobs and benefiting communities. Now, it's been 28 years of democratic experimentation, and I want to use a metaphor of a truck, that the state currently is like a 1-ton truck carrying a 20-ton load. Now, there are a few things that you can do, and there are engineers here and those who are in the logistics space will understand, because it's what they do every day. A 1-ton truck carrying a 10 or 20-ton load will require changes in the Excel system, will require that you retweak the engine to increase the torque, may require a new trailer, will require new springs. It will also require that you remove retreads, because there are lots of retreads in the system. So that then where the issue of building state capacity comes in. And it is possible that through a collaboration with yourselves, with the French companies, that we can indeed build state capacity. Earlier on, your co-presenter actually quoted Simone de Beauvoir. Many of you who've read their history will understand that in the post-war Europe in 1945, there was a lot of effort that went towards building dynamic state capabilities so that those who are elected and appointed are able to make quality decisions and they make them on time and in the best interest of the people, because the idea of leading the state is not to frustrate business, but is to enable opportunities to happen. So we are inviting and challenging you as leaders of corporate South Africa and beyond. Let's take public servants back into the simulator in order to give them the new type of skills required to enable growth to happen, like scenario planning, like modeling, like project management, like finance and supply chain. Those are the type of new age skills that are required in the public sector. Government departments are moving into cloud, but there is no cyber security capabilities within the state. It then raises the risk that even as you digitize the deeds office, which would make it easy for people to issue deeds, if there's no cybersecurity capabilities, then the threats will arise, as many of you experienced it when there was a hack in the master's office. So the challenge that we have as a National School of Government is that we want to collaborate, because servants do want to gain these new capabilities, either through a revolving door arrangement, which we did during the GIPSA period, either through bursaries and scholarships for executive education programs. The beauty of it now is that French universities can teach African public servants on these new age skills without them having to travel to France, because we can use virtual platforms, as we are doing with ENA, now ISNP, as we are also doing with INSEAD. However, there are cost implications associated with it, hence our call to French companies to make a contribution towards these efforts of rebuilding the capable state. Thank you.
What I want to do before we break for what's going to be an incredible piece of entertainment coming up a little bit later in a couple of minutes, Umoja Dance Group. We did say we finished early. Umoja, I'm going to join us. What I'd like to do, we're going to start on this side with Zanele. I want to just make sure that when we break, and we're going to have a coffee break, couple of snacks, that all of the panelists up here, someone in this room is going to go up and talk to them. But I want to get a clear sense of exactly what each of you are looking for. We're talking about a skill. So, from the National School of Government, Trace TV, Dassault, Vodacom, Sasol, Schneider, in less than a minute from each of you. Welcome to Working in Television. Normally by now, where's Iman Repeti? Iman Repeti is here somewhere. She knows we're having producers yell at us. So you've got 1 minute, each of you, to tell me what is the one skill that you need in your organization today to make a difference tomorrow. Let's start with you.
Great, thank you very much for the question. So at Schneider Electric, we're looking for resilient engineers and artisans, and we believe that we play a role in creating them. What we're looking for is partnerships with industry to find opportunities for employment for these people that we have trained, and also specifically collaborating together to get a larger impact altogether.
Sharp.
To the point.
As far as we are concerned at Trace, and particularly for Trace Academia, we are looking to expand our coalition of partners. We've got already about 20 companies and institutions that are with us, including, as I said, Schneider and many others who are here today. But we like to go further, because this topic of skills is completely related to the topic of youth unemployment that you discussed in a previous panel this morning. This is a time bomb for South Africa and for the African continent. We need to find solutions. And there won't be only one solution. It will be an addition of solutions. So we like to expand this coalition, maybe to, this great panel could be a kind of permanent forum, skills for the future, where all these partners and more meet each other, bring their different contribution to build the better world, the better South Africa that we are all expecting.
Busani.
Well, we want to bring execution diligence capabilities to the public sector across the spheres, especially for appointed public servants. To bring execution diligence, it requires that we bring everybody back into the simulator, as they do with pilots. That means giving project management training on stereotypes at a very high and intensive level, so that public sector employees can design, deliver projects on time, on budget, and according to specification. And of course, they have to be ethical in conduct of doing so. And so the French companies who are here and other stakeholders can play a big role in that regard, because we can facilitate these training opportunities either by supporting or sponsoring the training opportunities with French universities and others, but also by, through a revolving door arrangement, getting some of the public sector officials into your companies. In Singapore, they do. The reason why you won't tell a difference between a private sector and a public sector employee in Singapore is because they are able to go through the entire value chain in order to understand what is the experience of those who sit on the other side in business. The other side in government, they know that my responsibility is to unlock and not to frustrate.
Charlotte.
Thank you. We are looking for partners to repurpose the STEM education system of the country and probably of the region to build skills and importantly to build capacity to produce the skills for a low carbon economy emerging in a few years. It's not too far that we will be needing those low carbon economy skills. And we're seeing now that we need to actually concentrate on new skills that are emerging in renewables, in storage, in other non-conventional ways of generating and distributing, and actually ensuring that the energy sector is successful. So we're looking for partners to repurpose and to strengthen training and skills development in the country.
And Raul?
Very easy. I'm your partner. And same thing with Olivier, same thing with Niall. I think we all share the common goal, which is to bring this workforce to be ready for the skills of the future.
And you want more? Do you want new partners?
Obviously, but
What are
we're
you
also
looking-
willing
what are
to
you
partner
looking
with the
for?
public sector to also team up with the Department of Higher Education and Training to indeed modernize their curriculum and ensure that more than ever, the generation that leaves the universities, the TVET colleges are fit for jobs, but also keep able to create their own jobs.
Okay, so it's quite interesting if I said one skill. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about our skills transformation journey as a business. We've actually codified our skills transformation program to be #OneMoreSkill. We've said to ourselves as a business, we need to make sure that each one of our staff member has an opportunity to gain one more skill. So maybe #OneMoreSkill is what this country needs. So from my perspective, is we've identified what we call 14 key digital skills that will help us transform our business into the future. I'm glad to hear that Busani was talking about cybersecurity, because that's one of the key skills that actually not only a technology company like ourselves needs, but actually all businesses. We know the experience of what happens when you get hacked. So the skills that we need as a business, it's actually what those 14 digital skills, which includes robotic process engineering, which includes big data and analytics, which includes software engineering, which includes cybersecurity. These are all those future skills that we desperately need as a business, and I think definitely as a country. So on that note, #OneMoreSkill.
#OneMoreSkill. Round of applause, please, for our entire panel talking about skills. And it was so important because it's wonderful to hear the experts and the leaders talk about this, but I was hoping someone like me in the audience is sitting back going, great, but what can I give you? What do you need from me? You might not know exactly what I can do or what you need. So thank you to every single one of you for joining us. And we're going to be taking a little bit of a break, a couple of snacks. But before we get to that, please do yourself a favor. Before you get that food and those snacks, we're going to come back for the next session at 2 p.m. But before we get there, Umoja Dance Group are going to be coming in. They've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for this. They're going to be coming through. So please just give us a few moments of your time. I'm going to ask our panelists, unless you want to dance, you're welcome to stay on stage. Please make your way off. I'm good. activists, they're going for lunch.
They need to change it and come back with the last set.
How long is that going to take?
5 minutes.
So there's people waiting.